Welcome back to Not My Fantasy, the show where we watch and review and discuss the lore behind our favorite and least favorite fantasy films. I'm Cullen,
I'm Hannah.
and today we have a special guest, a colleague and coworker of mine and friend, Alina.
Hello. Hi.
Welcome.
So happy to have you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
She is an actor and voice actor and a bit of everything. Uh, So we're so happy to have her on for this episode. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. I work with Cullen at Netflix Animation. Is that okay to say?
Yeah, we've said that before. Yeah.
um, and we got to talking, and it came up that I worked on the Narnia films because I was the director's assistant at the time forever, and we built Narnia together, and we were just talking, and then he said he had a podcast. So yeah, I'm an actor and director and assistant and creative development person, and just kind of do a lot of different things. So
Yeah, I saw one of your plays
yes, thank you
in
for
Hollywood,
coming.
and it was a fun time. I shouted at one point, so I was very into it. Yeah, and you were part of a new Netflix movie that came out, The Magician's Elephant.
Oh,
That's really, I would recommend. It's a very sweet movie.
That's an
nice.
animated movie. Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, so today, we're talking about the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the 2005 film.
I can't believe it was 2005.
I know.
It
I
weirdly
can't
feels
believe
like
it.
it came out like a couple years ago because it's so crazy. I was watching it and like I recognized the music. There's something very essential about this movie in my life, and I didn't realize it until I rewatched it. So
Can I ask you,
I've
and I
seen
don't
it.
want to like
Yeah.
age you guys, but how old were you when you watched this movie?
I would have been in fourth or fifth grade.
Yeah, same.
Uh-huh.
We're
That's
like
okay.
10, not 10, 11. And so I
Yeah.
was like the prime target
Yes.
age group. I was like, because that leads into our question is like, have we seen this movie before? And we all have. And like, I grew up, like, I was obsessed with Narnia as a kid. My sister did a semi-illegal play of it at our church. And I was a chipmunk. I was a talking chipmunk. I was like a statue, and I was in Aslan's army. And we used to watch the BBC miniseries
Wait, I'm
all the
sorry.
time.
In your own siblings' play, you got cast as
A chipmunk.
nice.
I mean, I
Uh-huh.
was like 3 years old, like 3, 4 years old. Like,
Oh,
so
okay.
I
So this is before
also,
the movie. Got it.
yeah, so I had trouble adjusting because I was so young. It was almost like it was real to me. Like it was like I was
Mm.
living the story. And so
Yeah.
I mean that was my first play, and I like had so much fun. And we used to watch the BBC miniseries, and my mom read the books to us, and then I read the books, and we had had picture books of it. So I was in a no Harry Potter house, so we had Narnia.
Yeah.
And when this movie came out, I was obsessed. Saw it in theaters multiple times. I had like the extended edition DVD, and I had Narnia Stratego, which I still have in my house in LA. I had like toys like of like the action figures of the battle, and I recently even wrote an audio drama inspired by Chronicles of Narnia about kind of what happens when you have kids running a magical country, like kind of a coming of age
Mm.
story about the concept of faith. So this story, not only did I love it as a kid, it still kind of inspires me today. Like there's some stories, like I read Pinocchio as a kid, and I was just kind of like, okay. And then this like still kind of lives in my imagination and kind of fuels creativity. So those are the stories I really love. But Alina, what was your experience with Narnia before the movie and then including the movie? And
I actually so love that you talked about how you remember as a kid, because when I was a kid, I'm way old, so much older than you guys, but it tracks to kind of the into how even Andrew, I think, approached this. Andrew is the director of it. So I remember seeing an animated, was it? I don't think it was a series. I think it
it
was
was
like
a
a little
movie.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was a kid, and it like ruined me because watching Aslan die as in that cartoon, like, it was so gut-wrenching to me, like, I remember just weeping and, "Why? Did they do it to him?" So and I remember loving Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe as well, like, I don't know, it really resonated with me as a kid. So I remember when so I was working with Andrew on Shrek 2 at DreamWorks, and then he had started discussing, because I think Walden Media had gotten the rights from C.S. Lewis estate, which was a big deal because I don't
Yeah.
think anyone had gotten the rights to make this, and Doug Gresham is, like, the estate, he runs it, I
Mhm.
think he's C.S. Lewis's stepson or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
But anyway, so it was starting to happen, and Andrew, his into it was funny, he's like, "I" 'cause he had all these memories of reading the book when he was a kid, and then he reread it, and he was like, "I kind of" he actually was like when he pitched to direct it, he said, "I think I wanna do the memory of it, 'cause isn't your memory of the world
Yeah.
so big?"
Yeah,
Like,
and so vivid and
however it sat with you and however, like, whatever resonated, like, he's like, "That's what I wanted to make the movie of how I remember it as a kid." And then when, rereading the book and everything, and then as they were writing it, it was embellished in that way because it is sort of every kid's however it hit you. Like, those
yeah,
kids were, like, super real to you, and Aslan was so real. And, some of that really had to came into play when we were creating the look of Aslan, and, like, some of the, visual effects were, like, cutting edge at the time for, like, making Aslan because they wanted him super, super photoreal, and for Lucy and the kids on set, they made a beautiful, like, crazy detailed, beautiful Aslan, like, life size, like, the size of him, and so that when the girls were at the stone table with him, like, it was real. They weren't just looking at 2 tennis balls on a green screen. It was very like, we really tried to make it so the kids felt, like, as real as possible. So, yeah, so that was my end as a kid loving the animated movie and
yeah,
being gut-wrenched. But I think that I loved that as a kid. Like, I loved being super emotionally affected, like, even
yeah.
scared or anything, like, I feel like it mattered more, and I don't know if kids get those sort of big gut-wrenching things anymore, do they? Do they make content that's sort of like
I mean, I think, like, if you
I don't
look
know.
at some of, like I think the Disney princess genre still does go kind of dark. If you think of even, like,
Right.
Frozen with, like, the betrayal and
Mm,
she's alone, or, like, Moana, like, she's like, "Oh, my whole
yeah,
world," and kids like that. That's why kids love that brand and stuff because it's like they have big feelings and it gives them an
mhm,
outlet to, like, feel that, because if
yeah,
it's all just, like, rainbows and puppies, I don't think kids actually like it that much. Like, I
Yeah.
liked Little Bear, which was very low key, but, like, I also liked the drama of, like, Wizard of Oz and Narnia and, like, the high stakes,
mhm,
even though it scared you.
yeah,
Yeah. I think I mean we're obviously getting a little bit ahead, but I think Aslan's death in this movie is very, very intense. And I don't know if I have a comparison to that moment because this is very intense. Like we see him get
Yeah.
sacrificed, and that's
and those
crazy.
characters are scary for
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah.
like, they're orcs
Yeah.
and, like, really evil, like
Like even Tilda Swinton, like her design is she's scary.
Yeah.
and her
So
eyeballs get super big. Do you remember
mhm,
that in the
yeah,
Yeah.
stone
yeah.
table scene? They
She had
put these
like contacts in.
big, huge,
Uh-huh.
really dark contacts, like, right before
Yeah.
she stabs him, and it's like, "That's
Yeah.
scary for a kid." Yeah, they didn't
Yeah.
hold back.
No, they didn't, but I think that's why people liked it. And so, Hannah, what was your history with the Chronicles of Narnia, specifically this movie and this book?
I mean, I never read the well, that's not true. I know I had a very big version of it, and I think I'd read parts of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but I was so much about the movie. Also a Harry Potterless house, so we
Mhm.
had this. Um, but I had never seen like the series or the other movie that you were talking about. I'd never seen those. I still haven't. But I remember when the second movie was coming out and they had a lot of behind the scenes stuff on like Disney Channel. I was obsessed with watching that. but I never did get around to the other Chronicles of Narnia movies. I've only seen this one.
We'll get there.
But yeah, I mean, I remember wanting to be like part of this family. Like I wanted to be one of these kids. That's why I've placed myself conveniently in the middle of them.
So cute.
But yeah, I felt so connected to them as a kid. And even watching this, like I felt very connected to all of these characters. So yeah, I can't quite explain it because I didn't get into the book or anything, but I still have a very strong connection to this movie. Like everything is just so familiar. And I love the idea of like trying to represent the memory of however you saw it. Like I think it captures even just the memory of me watching this movie. Like it just feels like this crazy big memory that I had. So like a dream kind of.
Yeah. And it really places the kids as like heroes. And I think that's why kids like, because like, I mean, I loved Alice in Wonderland, right? But she's just kind of like, what's happening? But this kind of journey, like they're like the heroes and they're central, but they're still allowed to also be kids. You know, I think it like
Yeah.
strikes that balance where kids can be like, that could be me, you know, like.
That's so true. That's a really great way. It's totally a prophecy, right? Like the prophecy is that there will be sons of Adam and daughters of Eve who come and save Narnia, and they're like, "What?" That could every kid is like, "What? I could
Yeah.
actually have that." That's a really good, very poignant thing that probably that's why kids super relate to it.
I had
Yeah, and I think
stripes on my wall in my bedroom when I was little. I think it was before this movie even came out, but I would watch those stripes and they would like move, and I always thought like it was gonna take me to Narnia. Like that-
You're
aw.
so cute. I want to be friends with your little self.
Yeah, I think again kind of just like starting to get into the characters is that I don't think that any of their decisions are not childlike, but also not unrealistic. Like I feel like a child would be like, "Yes, I'm going to stay here and defend Narnia. Like I'm going
Yeah.
to do this." Like that feels so real for children even though it's like super high stakes, but it's like this movie is just very well done. The whole story
Yeah.
is just very good. So,
Yeah.
And even
very
Edmund, Edmund is so like every kid too. Like
mhm.
sometimes you make mistakes and they're high stakes and it feels like you've just ruined everything.
Feels like the
And
end of the world.
Yeah.
yeah, and you just trusted somebody that wasn't and you weren't feeling connected to your whatever, so you just made a gut decision
Yeah.
and then you still can get forgiven. I mean, that
Mhm.
is major thing for kids, I think. Like
Yeah.
I'm not bad at the core if I make
Mhm.
such a bad decision. And Aslan's the one who's like, you know, he just forgives. So it's like, okay.
That is a big difference because we talked about a few fairy tales here, or you even think of like Willy Wonka. Like there's a lot of like punishing of bad children and naughty
Mhm.
children. And Edmund isn't necessarily punished. He experiences bad things because he trusted the wrong person, and he's also
Yeah.
10, you know, or something,
Yeah.
like it's yeah. And so, but they are kind of they move on from it. Like they treat it as a big deal, but he's allowed to grow, because he's 10. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, this movie, Chronicles of Narnia: The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, is a 2005 film directed by Andrew Adamson, director of Shrek and Shrek 2,
Also, with as soon as I heard the character speak, I was like, "That's Prince Charming, Rupert Everett." I
He's the
heard the
fox.
fox, and I
Yep.
was like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
that definitely is him."
In the
Mhm.
Mario movie, I saw the Mario movie today, and
Rupert Everett's in that movie too.
no, but they played Holding Out for a Hero, and I'm like, I'm sorry, the fairy godmother in Shrek 2
Fairy
owns that
godmother.
song.
Anytime that song is in a movie, I was like, "Listen, you got to be really careful because I am looking to Shrek 2. Like you can't just use that song. You just can't.
That
It's better
movie's
than the
so good.
original. So
So
good.
good. I think that's one of the best sequels besides like Aliens, the second
Yeah, no,
Yes.
that's a
Aliens.
top sequel for
I
sure.
think
Absolutely.
Shrek 2 is so good. And I got to work on it. So I
We'll
say
have you
that
back.
yeah, we can talk about that too, but oh my god, it's so funny.
Yeah, and I actually, oh yeah, there's more. So Andrew Adamson co-wrote the screenplay with Anne Peacock, Christopher Marcus, and Stephen McFeely, based on the 1950 novel *The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe* by C.S. Lewis, the first installment in the Chronicles of Narnia film series, based on the first book written for the Chronicles of Narnia book series. It was produced by Walt Disney Pictures and Walden Media. You can find a draft of the script online.
Oh,
I
I
wonder what
I
version.
Yeah, it's there's definitely things that like you read and you're like, oh, this is different, this is different. I don't think I read the whole thing, but I skimmed through back when I started that project I was talking about earlier, and I was like, okay, let's look at some scenes. I'll mention some things that I saw in there, but I like when the script is different because sometimes people be like, oh, here's the script, and it's someone who just typed out what happened in the movie, and they're like, that's not what I'm
Mm.
looking for. I want to see like the
But
page to screen
yeah.
changes and like why those changes were made. And you can be like, oh, I see why they cut this or did this differently. Uh, this movie stars Liam Neeson, Tilda Swinton, James McAvoy, William Moseley, Anna Popplewell, Skinner Keynes, and Georgie Henley.
Who is just delightful. She is just so cute and just so good. She gives in this movie.
He's a
Like,
little just brilliant. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think what you were saying about how you tried to make it look very real for the actors, especially the child
Mhm.
actors, I think that shows like the
Mhm.
reactions seem very genuine. And we had just watched the 2017 Beauty and the Beast, where we're like, Emma Watson, like we've seen you act, like we know you're a
Yeah.
good actor, but in this movie, it's like you're not giving it. It's because
She had tennis balls and
yeah,
yeah.
she's just like alone in a
Mhm.
green screen room, you know, like
Yeah, we did so much to so much care was taken with those kids. Like everything to keep it as magical and real. Like James McAvoy, I don't know if you listed him, but he
yeah,
he was
Mhm.
pretty we had rehearsals for everything before we shot, and the kids were really close and they were all super bonded. And James and Georgie, Mr. Tumnus and Lucy were like fast friends. Like he's
oh
amazing. Like they were rehearsing and he had so much they were so sweet and he was just so giving and lovely. And but on the day that we were going to film the snowy scene, um she had never seen him in the makeup or
Mhm.
anything. They kept him totally separate from her, and we didn't show her any of the snow set. So when we brought Georgie on that day, like, she was blindfolded, and we had her, walk through that shot is her, like, first
Mm.
reaction of the snow, and then getting to the lamppost, and then seeing Mr. James for the first time was, like, totally real, and she was that perfect age. She was 8, I think, at the time, and,
Mm.
she just believed. She just thought it was play for her, it was just fun, and she just had that imagination that was like, "That's not James right now," or, like, she just
Mhm.
went there, and it was just so cool, like, it was pretty magical, and everything was really kid-focused in terms of
Mm.
keeping that set kind, and everybody was really lovely, and that, I think, comes from Andrew too, like, the way he cares about the whole picture. But yeah, that's cool that you noticed that, because their connection was really special,
Mhm.
yeah, and
and that it felt real, that it translated to you as a
Absolutely.
viewers is
yeah.
cool.
And I definitely appreciate, that so much care was taken with, the child actors to like feel safe and stuff because you see there's so many times when that isn't a priority. And I think that translates in the movie is that there's we talk about a lot on this podcast about a sense of wonder and like childlike
Mhm.
imagination and like that kind of care to the story. So that it definitely felt like a lot of thought and care and like child centric vision was in it. And I
Mhm.
think that that's one of its why it holds up.
That's
Yeah.
cool. That's
I
cool.
even think like when I was watching it, like especially like William Moseley's character, like decides like he's gonna stay. I was just like, this doesn't really feel like a movie. It feels like I'm watching kids play, like make believe.
Yeah.
But it's so good. Like it definitely translates very well.
It's so cool, like, now when you guys are talking about the kids, it's like they're each at a different age, right?
Hmm.
Like, Peter's the oldest, and he feels this massive amount of responsibility because his dad is in the war, or, like, his mom, so he's like, "I am on the brink of manhood, and I've gotta be,
Hmm.
like, super strong," and then Edmund's pushing away against that because they, are butting heads, and then Susan's just cerebral. Everything is
Yeah.
like, unless it's, like, totally spelled out, doesn't work for, so it's like they're all
Hmm.
at different phases, and they have to, even in a family dynamic, they're coming at it in different ways, And we get to, like, each as a kid, I bet you're like, "Oh, I'm definitely more of a Susan."
I'm a
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd
Susan now.
probably react a little bit more like Peter in this, or like, "Oh my god, I'm an Edmund. Ah."
But it's okay. I can get forgiven as
Yeah.
long as a
Yes,
lion
exactly.
dies.
Yeah. But they're all they feel like siblings, but they all feel very different. And that I think is one of the strengths of the story. Tilda Swinton was amazing. And my favorite fun fact is that she turned down Harry Potter because she doesn't believe in boarding schools.
Love that.
And I love bringing that up. I don't even know where I learned it. Maybe it's fake news. Who knows? But
I love
I
it.
just love being like Tilda
Oh my
Swinton.
gosh.
Allegedly, she
I
Unless,
doesn't
didn't know
believe in
that.
boarding schools.
yeah,
That
and I'm
makes
like,
so much sense, by the way, because I think at the time of that, she's amazing, by the way. She was really, she did not want to be, I remember she was very concerned about playing it arch and being like, I don't want to do like Cruella, I don't want
yeah,
it to be. And Andrew's like, first of all, you are not ever anything surface. So like
yeah,
let that go. You're just amazing.
Mhm.
But her kids they came to set once and they were living in Scotland and they came to New Zealand for a visit and they were like tree magical, like they didn't they were wild, beautiful, like the freest souls I've ever seen. I think they were twins and they were like barefoot. They'd run and climb trees. She's like, that's all they do. So I totally, when you said she doesn't believe in boarding school, I'm like,
It
oh,
makes sense.
I can
That
totally
tracks.
see that. Cause
yeah.
I was like, I want to be best friends with your son. Is that okay? He's 7. And like, I've never seen anyone so deep and amazing. Yeah.
This movie made $747 million worldwide against a $180 million budget, becoming the third highest grossing film of 2005. So
Nice.
big
Third
hit.
highest? Interesting.
And then Weta Workshop, they worked on Middle Earth. We saw them a few episodes ago. They worked on this movie, and it was filmed in New Zealand, Czech Republic, Slovenia, and Poland.
Mm.
Uh, and then
Fancy
it
me.
won an Academy Award for Best Makeup.
Well
Yeah.
deserved.
Howard and Tammy.
And it was nominated for sound mixing and visual effects. It was also nominated for Best Song and Best Score at the Golden Globes and Grammys.
Oh, that's
Nice.
I love the soundtrack too. When you
It's
said
so
that, Hannah,
good.
I listen to it sometimes. It's just on my shuffle and I'm like, oh, I love this song. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it is a top tier soundtrack, and this movie it was definitely made because Disney was like, okay, we want our Lord of the Rings, our Harry Potter, but
Mhm.
it escaped feeling derivative of those works. Like
Yes.
the sound, the look is definitely connected to that zeitgeist, that fantasy zeitgeist in the 2000s, but it still has its own character for sure. So yeah, let's talk a bit about the backstory or the lore. So we're not gonna this is a pretty straightforward adaptation. So any differences between the book and movie, I'm gonna mention kind of as we go through the plot of the movie, because otherwise I would just like be telling the same story twice. It's not like last time we were talking about two very different versions of Pinocchio. Like it's very much the same story, but it's a the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a wildly successful and popular book of children's literature, the first in a very successful fantasy series. It is one of the most widely sold books across the world, and one of the most read aloud books, hugely influential on the genre. And it was written by C.S. Lewis and published in 1950. He said it came from an image he had of a fawn with parcels and a lamppost. That's kind of where he brought it. It's famous for its very strong Christian themes. He said it's not an allegory, but a supposal. So Aslan isn't representative of Jesus, he is Jesus. He's been referred to as Jesus's persona. So it's like he's like Jesus in a different world.
Mhm. I
So
also
that
want to mention to the listeners and the viewers that we are recording this on the Saturday before Easter. So yesterday on Good Friday, I watched this. It's like, oh, this is so fitting. I love this.
yeah, that was our seasonal pick. We're like, all right, it's
Yes,
Easter.
very timely.
Lewis claims that this was not an intentional when he didn't set out to write a Christian message. It just kind of happened. I don't know how much I believe that because it's so
Mm,
integral, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And he said, oh, maybe it'll help people come to Christ later in life, because that was his personal journey where he wasn't religious for a lot of his life and then became very religious.
Hmm.
And he's a very famous Christian author. So what are these Christian themes? The death and resurrection of Christ to pay for sins he did not commit. So, I'm doing a very extremely, extremely, extremely brief recap of the Easter story for
Mm.
people who aren't as familiar with that. The Christian Easter story is based on that Adam and Eve, the first humans, they sinned and they cursed humanity with sin and death and hell. So everyone went there. And then God
Thanks,
sent,
guys.
thanks, God sent his only son, Jesus, to pay the price of sin by dying on the cross. And his mother and his female friends were there, which I think you see that replicated in this story. Well, after he died, he went to hell and he got all the good people out, like the cast of the Prince of Egypt, like all those characters, and he took them up to heaven, and now heaven is open. And on the third day, he rose again from the dead, and he said hi to Mary Magdalene and was like, you need to tell everybody about this, and Christianity was born. So that's
Mm.
extremely, extremely condensed. But
Yeah.
that's what we see kind of in this story, the kind of death, resurrection, which is like that theme of death and resurrection is common in folklore and stories across the world,
Yeah.
whether it's like Snow White or like Persephone in the underworld. And that doesn't mean they're all the same story. It's just like it's a theme that resonates with people. So I think, obviously people who grew up in Christian households probably were exposed to this story very intentionally. But I think that because that theme is a universal, I don't think you have to be or have been Christian to appreciate the story and like the message of hope and forgiveness. I think that's like a human thing. So I think
Yeah.
that's why this story taps into like why it's so beloved. And we usually talk a little bit about the creatures of the worlds that we visit. There are a lot in Narnia, so I'm going to keep this brief because some of them are creatures we've seen in other worlds before, we've talked about. So let's start. We have Mr. Tumnus is a faun. So we have fauns and satyrs. So this is a long, complicated, vague backstory. I'm going to quickly sum up. So in the classical world, there were goat-like gods like Pan and Fauna. And there are also the Roman god Faunus, who is like a god of enchanted forests. And then when the Greek and Roman religions like morphed together, Pan and Faunus were made the same. So Fauni were these like Roman gods of like wild places, and they're like naked men. And then the satyrs were first these Greek beings who are like really ugly and like hairy, and then they eventually became half man and half goat. And the satyrs and fauns were kind of combined.
Yeah. My boyfriend was like, I was like, oh yeah, he's a fawn. And Lau's like, he's a satyr. I was like, no, he's a fawn. But I don't know what the difference is. I'll ask Cullen. But it's already in the presentation. I will happily report back to him.
Yeah, so that's why people kind of use them interchangeably, and then other people will be like, they're different. And it's like many things we've discovered with the origin of different mythical beings, it's usually pretty vague as to what is what. Beavers are real. They're not just a magical creature.
Whoa.
But in Europe, they were symbols of industriousness and hard work. And in Native American stories, they were often like helpful beings,
Mm.
like animal helpers. We have dryads and naiads. So we talked about dryads a lot, I think, in the Two Towers, and they're nymphs, goddesses of the trees, naiads, spirits of wells and springs. This is my very nitpicky beef with this movie. We talk about my nymph erasure. I felt like they were greatly reduced in their capacity in Narnian society. Uh, and
Yeah.
I don't know what the technical reason is. Maybe because it's harder to make them fight, or because nymphs are associated with like aggressive sexuality. Hence why I think it's called hypersexuality now, but it used to be called nymphomania and satyrisis, based on nymphs and satyrs, because they were
Interesting.
very horny mythical creatures.
Mm.
Yeah, my
Yeah, I think
theory.
the dryad is I think there's just the one time they appear in the tent scene, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There's the reference when they walk into Aslan's camp. There's like the
they
trees
wave.
are alive and they come alive a little bit, but
Mhm.
yeah, not
Yeah,
fully utilized.
Yeah, so that's my nip
Nymph erasure.
nymph erasure.
You gotta get you like a little sign.
But they did only visit Peter, I think. So maybe there was a little like only the
Oh.
only the teenage boy will see me
Mm.
because he's
Uh,
already dreaming.
dwarves, they're in here. We talked about them in Lord of the Rings, in the Black Cauldron, as kind of originating from the Fae, in Norse mythology. And we have, I think this is our first movie with centaurs, half man, half
Oh.
horse. In Greek mythology, they were typically bad. They were brutes or rapists, like they kidnapped Hercules' wife and kind of resulted in his death. But Chiron was this good centaur who like trained all the heroes, and all the Narnian centaurs are very much in the Chiron tradition, like wise warrior types. Uh, we have unicorns, magical horses with horns, goat hooves, and lion tails, symbols of purity and resurrection and wildness. Horns thought to cure disease. We'll be talking about unicorns a lot very soon, so we're not going to spend too much time.
Too much. Yeah. Also, you know what? Now I'm glad you mentioned that because I need to write down notes about the newest Shazam movie.
Oh, did you see it?
I did.
I did too.
Yeah.
That was a time.
He's the rainbow motherfucker. Oh my god, I laughed so hard. Anyway, but yeah, I have to write unicorn notes for that episode. Okay.
We Pegasi were in Narnia, winged horses born from Medusa's severed neck. That's their origin in Greek mythology. Griffins, half lion, half eagle. Mermaids. We're going to talk a lot about mermaids very soon as well, but I think most people know what a mermaid is.
There were mermaids in this?
Yeah,
or in the movie, or in just the story?
Yeah, they're like hopping above the water as we zoom into the castle.
Oh,
yeah, at the end.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, they were
okay.
frozen. They probably were underwater frozen for a super long
sense.
time. But
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Santa Claus is here.
Oh
We
my
really
God.
We
Father
don't
Christmas.
have time for him. That's what you wrote in the notes.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, I was like, I texted Cullen. I was like, Santa's in the Bible.
And then we have minotaurs, which were in Greek mythology the son of a Cretan queen and a bull. Half man, half bull. The minotaur was in a labyrinth and would eat people. They would send Athenian teenagers to be eaten by him until Theseus and Ariadne defeated him. Theseus took all the credit. It's really Ariadne. So, and then they're in the old script actually of the movie. They're referenced in the book, and they were replaced with harpies, which I think was probably a smarter choice. They're incubuses, which are sex demons in medieval lore meant to explain like wet dreams and sexual assault. So I get why you switch them out.
Makes sense.
With a harpy. Yeah. And there's a ton of other bad guys: ogres, hags, ents, boggles, ghouls, specters, werewolves, and basically every kind of creepy crawly thing. So we would be here all day if I was like, okay, let's talk about ogres, let's talk about werewolves, let's talk about hags.
Yeah, we're saving the ogre talk until Shrek.
Yeah.
The text.
The ogres may be coming up sooner than we would think. People might be surprised where ogres pop up.
I'm gonna have to be, because I seriously cannot even think of where ogres would be in our next lineup. So
yeah, so that's kind of the lore. I kind of kept it lore light because it's a longer movie, but so there's a lot of different. That's one of the things I love about Narnia is like the menagerie hodgepodge of creatures. It's like Tolkien had a system of like, we have this and it's derived from like this mythology, and Lewis was like, whatever will be fun.
Yeah. And then you just have it all, and then you go like, bad guys, good guys, bad guys, good, like shove them on each side.
Yeah. So let's talk about the movie. We open in London. You may know it from the song London Boy by Taylor Swift. That's how you may have heard of London.
She made it famous.
Yeah, she made London famous. Yeah. We see it's the London Blitz, and there's bombs dropping. It's World War II. We see the kids are scared, like Lucy's crying. They're running out to the shelter, and Edmund goes back to grab a picture of his dad, and Peter comes to get him, and the house almost blows up, and they run into the shelter, and he's yelling at him like, "You're so selfish." I think this scene is very key in setting up their dynamic.
When are you going to learn to do as you're told?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was very much a script addition.
Yes.
'Cause I
Yeah.
don't believe that was in the book. I mean, if anything, it's just like, okay, kids are going out to the countryside, like,
Yeah, they don't
and
explain
just
it
to
enough.
Interesting.
explain the context of, like, what was going on, like, the actually sending your kids away from London was, like, it's really like, that's a big thing to put your head around, like, "I'm not gonna be your parent for a while, like, you have to go somewhere safe," and just putting literally name tags, pinning
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
to
Labels.
their yeah, and, like, with a little box and, like, n hardly anything.
I
Like,
think
so,
it
yeah, they put it in that context.
Yeah, and it explains a lot of their behavior, but I think especially Edmund
Yes.
more when you think of like, okay, yeah, he's a brat, but like he's living
He has a
through
good reason.
yeah, like
He's
some
going
pretty
through some
upsetting
stuff.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
grounds like, he it's just there they just they knock heads because he
yeah.
doesn't think, but he wants something emotional that connect so he won't lose track of his dad, right? So it's
Yeah.
like you can't hate him.
Yeah.
It's just that they just don't see eye to eye at all. Yeah.
Yeah, and the I like that's I think an improvement over the book because I reread the book in prep for this episode. It's a quick read. And I listened to a couple chapters while I was driving and then but like Edmund, it's kind of there's a lot of weird derogatory comments about school in the book. And there's this comment that like Edmund went to this school that made him like bad and like made him a
Mm.
bully to people who are smaller than him. And they don't really it's just these couple offhand comments. But I think is much easier for an audience to grasp, and it doesn't have like weird educational pedagogy just thrown in.
That and it again grounds us in like that sort of like the empathy of it. It's like I understand why he does that, and like yeah, we don't hate him for it. I wouldn't even say like I think less of him for it. Like it is just one of those things where they just butt heads. Like they both care a lot, but it's just yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so when they got to the countryside, these are strangers that they're just sending
Yeah.
children off to strangers.
Hmm.
Cool. For the longest time, I was like, yeah, Professor Slughorn is their uncle. I was like, no, no, he's not. He's just a random guy who was like, I got a big house, I guess.
Take
Yeah.
It's
some kids in.
crazy. Yeah.
And it was crazy that this isn't a made up thing that
No, this
happened. This is
actually
just
happened.
and so yeah, they're sent away and like Edmund is like, I don't need to be like handheld and I don't want like mom to kiss me and Peter's distracted watching the soldiers and Susan in typical oldest girl fashion is the one keeping them all together,
Hmm.
and they arrive at the tiniest dinkiest platform at the far end,
Yeah.
and they're picked up by someone in a horse and buggy.
Oh God, rough. That's rough. I
Yeah.
uh
guess, I mean, what was that, the 40s? So like cars weren't as widespread at all, especially in the country. And then, you know, they live off of a dirt path.
yeah.
I guess a horse carriage is right. That sucks. Yeah, the
and they
past was crazy.
And they go to this
Yeah.
big fancy house and they're like, no touching, no running, no jumping, she does not like children,
No
obviously.
touching the historical artifacts.
I can't remember her name, Miss
Mrs.
Petty?
McCready.
Mrs.
Yeah, they call her the
McCready.
McCready
The
at one
McCready.
point. The
Mhm.
McCready.
And there's this scene they're like getting ready in bed, and I always where Lucy's like, these sheets feel scratchy. Because
Scratchy.
that's such an iconic, like I remember like when you'd be anywhere away from your bed, like sleeping somewhere
Mm.
else, you're like, this isn't
And
right.
you know
Like
they're stiff and probably smell like mothballs. The whole
Yeah.
place is just like nobody's slept in these beds forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, it's gonna be great. We're gonna play outside and we're gonna go in the woods, and then it's
Cut to it's
raining.
raining because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
England. So, or are
yeah.
they in Scotland, or is it
England,
just
right?
the
I think they're
countryside?
just countryside
Yeah.
Okay,
In England. Yeah.
I didn't know how far away they sent them. That was a long train ride. It seemed like.
It did seem long enough for a full song.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
exactly.
could have been like Bath or Bristol or something or Glastonbury. Who knows where they went,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah, Bath is where everyone in Jane Austen times goes for their health.
Yep. Exactly.
That salty air. Uh and they're I love the scene where they're with the dictionary and they're playing a game where they have to like guess the root language of each
Oh, I
word.
thought they were gonna do like a spelling bee. That like that's why he was asking, is it Greek or is
Latin.
it Latin?
Yeah. And Edmund says, "Is it Latin for worst game ever invented?"
Wasn't the word like gastrointestinal or
Gastro,
something?
and I don't think,
Gastrovascular.
it's a word. I don't know. I remember I looked it up. I'm like, I don't think that's a word.
I feel like gastro is like your stomach, like digestion. Vascular, I think, is like veins.
Can I tell a really funny story about
Yeah,
this really quick?
of
Okay.
Absolutely.
course.
So during casting, we were down to like 2 picks for each child. And we pretty much had, our hopes. And we did a screen test. And so we had Georgie and Anna, Will and uh, Skander. So like the main, like the Pevensies, as we know them, they were in the screen test. And a screen test is a fake set that looks really real, lit and shot like, like a movie. So we can really kind of show the producers and the execs back at Disney, these are our choices and this is how they're going to work together, right? So we had them play this scene where they're bored in like, like the lines were there, but like improvise it as well. And
Yeah.
so Georgie had the dictionary and they're like, just, find a word, whatever word, and just you guys go on it. So she was going through and she's like, scrotum. What is scrotum? And Anna's face. And like it was so brilliant because this was the like screen test and they all were like they just went with it and it was so funny, but she's like she literally didn't know what it
Yeah.
was.
I love that. That is
But
so good.
it was so cute. Yeah. So there was a little fun today.
That's so funny.
Gastrovascular, it is an adjective meaning functioning both digestion and circulation. So I was right. Gastrovascular.
I remember though my siblings would have my older siblings. I'm the youngest brother. A bit of Edmund, a bit of Lucy. But like I remember they would do games sometimes that I thought were so boring. Like we would measure the action figures, like the height of the action figures, and I was like, this is boring. Because if anyone was taller than Boba Fett, my brother was like, they're disqualified. No one can be taller than Boba Fett. So like, what is the point of this game? I was like, and they were like probably learning about that in school because they were closer in age. So that was like an interesting thing to them. But I was like, ugh.
Is this Latin
So
for the
funny.
worst game ever
Yeah.
invented?
And yet I couldn't go off and do my own thing. I was like, okay, I have to be here. Like that weird
That's so
sibling
cute.
group thing. Yeah. So
And
it's
isn't Edmund like carving something in like the bottom of a piece of furniture or something? He's just
he's like
being
under the
destructive.
chair.
Yeah, he's just bored.
and then they're like, okay, let's play hide and seek. And I love that they play Oh Johnny Oh in this scene as they're like running around, and that's where she finds the wardrobe,
Yeah.
which is
The spare
the spare beautifully done with like imagery from the Magician's Nephew book, the first book in the series.
There's so much work put into the images on that wardrobe.
And
Art
they
department.
yeah, the art department
Yeah.
been working overtime in this
Killing
movie.
it.
There was a lot
Killing
of
it.
discussions about everything. Yes. We had a great production designer, Roger Ford, who I loved.
Yeah, I mean, it paid off because it's a very
Mhm.
cohesive look of a film. And which Narnia is a very diverse world with a lot of different things, so it like making it all feel like yes, one real organic world. And you definitely feel that. And this is where we first see it because she goes in the wardrobe and she's combing through the coats. She doesn't close it all the way, which is a big thing in the book. They're always like only an idiot would shut themselves in a wardrobe. And then Edmund, when he goes in, he shuts the door.
Yeah.
So
yeah, to try to taunt her, and it's like, well, you're gonna get what you deserve, clearly. But I love that she's backing up into it and just going through all the coats, and then suddenly she hits the ranch with the snow.
Yeah, they really play like the reveal is so good. And
Yeah, because she's still hiding, right? Like she's
yeah,
still like going toward the back, and then she's
Yeah.
like, "What's that?" And I was thinking because it's Edmund who's looking straight. He's going forward because he's
Yeah.
like, "Lucy, where are you?" Okay, yeah, you're right.
And it's funny, I didn't really quite remember the movie this way, but there's this reveal, there's Edmund's reveal, and then the reveal with all four of them. It's really interesting.
I think Disney really missed out because they never made a Narnia part of the theme parks. Because this would be so cool, even just a
Oh.
ride where like you're like you're in the house, and then you
Yes.
like go in and you go through the wardrobe and it becomes winter, and like that's where you like get on the ride vehicles. Or
Oh.
I think
Yeah.
this would have been such a good ride.
Yeah, honestly, 2007, 2008, that's when they should have had it off and running.
Yeah.
Nope, they
They
missed
missed that
out.
boat. That's stupid. You're right.
Yeah. So she discovers this winter wonderland, everything's like gorgeous fir trees and a lamppost in the middle of the snow, which is such a powerful image. I think that really sticks in people's brains. And she hears a shuffling, and she screams because she's hearing strange feet. And then we
She's a
meet,
child.
we meet Mr. Tumnus. He is a faun who is shirtless with a scarf in this winter. Those nips rock
Makes
hard,
sense.
could
Yeah.
cut glass.
Mhm.
But he's style first, and I do believe that about Mr. Tumnus.
That
Style
red scarf,
first.
that little swatch
Mhm.
of red.
Yeah,
Form then function.
yeah. That's like a faun. In the book, there's a line where the queen is like tells Edmund like, "Oh well, fawns will say anything," and then Edmund like repeats it like it's a fact. Fawns will say anything. Which is so funny because that is kids hear something once and are like, "Yep."
Yep.
So he asks like, "Oh, where are you? Like, are you a small beardless dwarf?" And she says, "Actually, I'm tallest in my class."
Love
Uh,
that.
Little
and
sass.
Mm-hmm.
like, "Where are you from?" And she's like, "Finchley." She's like, "Are you a daughter of Eve?" My mom's name is Helen.
That's actually her real mother's name too. Helen is her real mom's name, so we put that in there.
I love that.
And I love it where he's like, she's like, "Well, Lucy," and she puts her hand out, and he like does it. He's like,
It's like,
You
what do I
shake
do
it.
with that? And then he takes, he goes, wiggle, wiggle. I was like,
Yes.
love it.
Very
like,
sweet.
"Why? I don't know."
And that's a great question. Why do we still shake hands? It's so strange.
Don't know.
It is so weird.
Yeah.
I
So
don't like doing it.
I've heard theories about it, but I've never done enough research to like
Mm.
verify.
That should be on our next lore dump. Why we shake hands.
Why we
Shaking
shake hands.
The lore of shaking hands.
And so he's like, "Oh, if you're a daughter of Eve, would you come have tea with me? Don't go to a second location with a stranger, kids."
Yeah.
It's like she's like, "Oh, I should be getting back." He's like, "Oh, there's sardines and cake."
Ugh.
And she's like, "I guess that there's sardines." So Lucy, she likes sardines. These kids have some interesting
Salty.
tastes.
Salty.
Well, this was wartime too, so
Yeah.
like they were rationing
That's-
everything. They probably
that's
hadn't
true.
had cake or anything in a
Yeah.
long time.
Well, I remember hearing that other companies that were optioning the movie, they wanted to move the setting to America and like change Turkish delight to like a cheeseburger.
Oh
And
no. This could never work in America. No.
yeah, I think there is something British about it. Like it's universal, but I think that setting and like how the war affects the kids is
Yeah.
a part of the strength.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because that didn't happen here. Like, yes, like there was like low supplies, a lot of things, and like end up like rationing in a way, but like we weren't bombed here.
It wasn't in
Yeah.
our backyard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that is, I think, so critical to the story. It just absolutely is.
And so he takes her to his cave. It's this beautiful like cave in the mountain.
All
I
of the
love,
houses in this world,
yeah,
love it. I mean, except for the ice castle, I don't love that. So cozy.
yeah.
So cozy.
I always because we did Chronicles of Narnia like the play twice because like this when my sister was older they put it on for like the younger kids at the church, and like I remember I designed like the stone table. I made like little glyphs on like cardboard, and like we would like paint different books and it was always so fun to make Mr. Tumnus's house, and like because it just has to be this cozy little nook. And she asks about his father. "Oh, is that your father?" And she's like, "Oh, my father's fighting in the war." And he's like, "Oh, mine too."
That was
Uh,
a long time ago.
and he talks about how Narnia used to be this beautiful land, with summer, and they used to dance with the dryads all night, and they play music, and they hunt for the stag, and it was this like beautiful time, and but it's not that way anymore. Which is because now it's always winter and never Christmas.
Which I agree would suck.
Yeah.
I think when
Yeah.
there's winter out and there's not Christmas actively happening anytime, I'm upset.
A Lifetime of February.
Yeah, February in the Midwest.
Or yeah, if you're Midwest, you're really thinking slush and like the gray part of winter, the gross
January,
part,
February.
Yeah.
not the
Yeah.
pretty part, not
Mhm.
the white
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Not White Christmas, like White Groundhog's Day. Uh
So
and
can I share a
yeah,
little bit of
of
something?
course.
I'm gonna
Always
shift.
we want you to share anything you want to share.
So it's just
Yeah.
a funny story about the casting of Mr. Tumnus because that went on for quite a while and many people read for it. And we had a different casting director for the kids and then someone else for the adults. And James's tape, I remember watching and it kind of came through a little bit early. And I was making notes on everything because I would get all the tapes and I read and stuff. And he was great. And but we were just taking in everybody. And then it started to come down to like they started favoriting this other actor who was an older man, and I would watch his tape and be like, "Oh, I'm so creeped out." It's just creepy when you think of,
Mhm.
like, him talking to an eight-year-old girl. It felt very wrong. It felt
Yeah.
like, I don't know, it just felt not good, like
Yeah.
pedo-y, a little not
Mhm.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And then you were really like, "Shit, this is, like, dark stuff," like and
Mhm.
I went back and I was like I showed Andrew James's tape again, I'm like, "You gotta watch James again because he's so childlike, and he's
Yeah.
so innocent in the way he does it that it's the only person we've seen that I don't think is weird or creepy or doesn't have an edge that you're, like, gonna be afraid for her
Yeah.
immediately,
Yes.
and it was a really hard line to find,
That
Yeah.
and
would be. That's a
it's a
hard,
really
yeah.
hard line, and James was very like, he wasn't huge like he is now,
Mhm.
but he was gonna
Yeah.
be huge anyway, but he had done, like, a couple movies, and he was Scottish and whatever, and the casting person, when we called about him, she was like, "James came in and did that with he" and she was like, "Do you have any questions? You want any us to fill you?" And he's like, "No, no, I just wanna kinda go and, kind of do" and he just had that innately,
Mm.
so it was a really I'm really proud of that, and Andrew's like, "It could have been someone else if you hadn't brought James back into"
And it
so
could have
we joked
been.
we joked a lot. It was like, "Alina, you're the reason why James has a huge career." I'm like, "That's very
There you
funny."
go.
And we laugh about it, but it's like our own private little thing.
Yeah.
But it's because
Society
it
thanks
was
you for that.
well,
Yeah.
he was gonna be massive anyway. It was a matter of time and whatever, and I don't think Tumnus really put him over the edge, but he was literally the only one that was not creepy. And then when she wakes up and he's, like, devastated by what he did, it
Yeah.
was so touching, right? Like, it was like, "I did a bad thing," and yeah, he just
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny, I had never really thought about that. And I think it's because it doesn't feel creepy. It I don't know, like it does. It feels innocent.
Yeah, he's very charming and he doesn't like he's not like, I don't know, petting her hair or anything. He's like he offers his arm, and then in the
Mm.
Very
house he's like
gentlemanly.
giving her food and stuff, but he's not like there's not a
There's
lot of
nothing
touching.
behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it is a fine line to walk, but I think he does where it's like, oh, he's like your fun uncle, who wants to like have tea and chat. He's not
Yeah.
like the weird neighbor,
Yeah.
there's and because
It's
that's
so
how
hard to
Lucy sees
not
him.
as an
Yeah.
actor, though, think about it, like, you have to not play any ulterior motive at all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you can't because if the audience catches that, they're gonna be like, "Lucy, don't go."
Yeah, because I think when I first watched the scene, and I think I just sort of have the same memories when I do watch different scenes, is that I don't feel that he's trying to kidnap her. When he kind of like looks around, I was like, oh, he's not supposed to be with her. Like he could get in
Yeah.
trouble. Like that's how I read it. And it's really his performance. It's just so good. It doesn't seem like he's trying to like turn her in. It's like he's he wants to get to know her, but he's trying to like protect them. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's yeah, I mean,
I don't
well
think it
done
was
on that.
it was never anything anyone of us were even concerned about. Like, no, I read the book and I never thought Mr. Tumnus was creepy
Right.
and like it wasn't until we were seeing everybody's tape we were like, "Oh my god. This is a
Yeah.
really hard line to find."
Yeah.
And none of the writers knew, like, we didn't write those scenes to think that we have to be careful of that. It was just
Right.
not until they were words coming out of actors' mouths where you're like, "That's creepy. I'm nervous for the
Yep.
girl. I'm nervous for the kid. I'm nervous for the
Yeah.
kid." Until
Yeah.
you were like, "Nope, I'm not nervous. I would
Yeah.
go. I would be Lucy and I would go." Like, so it
Yeah.
was really interesting.
That is really interesting.
And because he's like, "Are you familiar with Narnian lullabies?" And she says no. He's like, "Oh, good, because this isn't one." And he plays this like song that lulls her to sleep. And there's like you see the creatures dancing in the fire, and then there's a
Mhm.
lion that roars at him and blows out all the candles, and he looks guilty.
Yeah.
And we don't know how much time has passed when Lucy wakes up because she's fallen asleep, and she
Mhm.
sees him crying, and she's like, "What's going on?" He's like, "I'm a very bad fawn." And she's like, "Wow, I know you're a good fawn." He's like, "It's nothing I'm done, it's something I'm doing. I'm kidnapping you." And there's that moment where he's like, "It's the White Witch. She says if we ever saw a son of Adam or daughter of Eve to turn them in." And she has this line where she's like, "I thought you were my friend." And she says it so sweet and heartbreaking that you're like, "Yep, no, yep, of course he changes course." Like he already felt bad at that line. Is like, you can't let that little girl down.
Mm-mm.
So
And then
he
there's like, it's kind of nice to have that danger too. Like, it's dangerous. And he's like, in it, I mean, that's not unwarlike too. Like people hiding Jews, like
Yeah,
it's very, it's doing the right thing, even though
Yeah.
you're terrified of what the consequences could be. So he's, rushing back with her,
Mhm.
yeah,
getting her back to the wardrobe, um, and doing the right thing. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Even some of the trees could be on her side though.
Yeah.
That's he's like, we got to be careful.
And she's like literally on like the trees.
And he's like, he says, "You made me feel warmer than I have in 100 years." And
Yeah.
so she gives him the handkerchief because you need it more than
He
I do.
yeah. Classic line.
And she runs back, and she's like running back. She's like, "I'm back, I'm back." And they're like, "What, you don't get hide and seek?"
yeah.
Like,
She's like, I've been gone for hours. And it's like, I just got done counting.
yeah. And Edmund is being mean to her, and Peter is like, "When are you gonna learn to grow up?" And because they're like checking the wardrobe, like Susan's knocking at the back, and there's this line that is iconic in my family where he says, like, "You think you're dad, but you're not." But he says it very fast, so sometimes it sounds like, "You think you're dead, but you're not." So we used to always say that as kids.
Yep.
But if someone said that to me, like, because as a kid, I was like, "Yeah, Peter all the way." But like now, thinking back when I was a kid, if someone said, "When will you learn to grow up?" I would be pissed. I'd be
Mhm.
so mad.
Oh, because it's Peter says that to Edmund,
Yeah,
right? Like,
Yeah.
stop
yeah,
teasing her. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And she's like, "I would," and Lucy's upset too because she's like, "I wouldn't lie about this. Like, I wouldn't just
Yeah.
make this up." Uh, and so, but that night, she wakes up and she sneaks off, and she opens the door, and the candle blows out, and she's like, "Back to Narnia."
And
Uh,
Edmund follows her.
Edmund follows her. He's being a little sneak. And then he's looking for her in this. So he's like, "Oh, she's right." He's looking for her, and then we hear bells and a sleigh with the reindeer, and he's pushed to the side because he doesn't get out of the way. And the dwarf comes out and is going to stab him because he didn't bow to the queen. And he's
Yeah.
like, "I don't know anything. Like, what's going on?"
Like, I'm a tourist.
And she's like, what is it now? And then he says, "I was following my sister," or something. Or, "I'm
Mhm.
a boy." And she's like, "What?" And she like is like, "Oh, come over here." And she's like, "You look so cold, come in." And she's just this tall, statuesque, like pale white fascist dictator. uh
Yeah.
and it's very it he brings her, and it makes me think of in our Frozen episode when we talked about Kai and the Snow Queen, that kind
Mhm.
of like, this she makes you feel unsafe, for Edmund. You're like,
Yes.
"Edmund, you need to get away." And she's like, "Oh, come get under my fur, would you like something to drink, hot chocolate, oh, Turkish delight."
Yeah.
hmm
Which I tried as a kid and did not like. I think as an
It's
adult I
gross.
was like, it's better than I remembered it, but
It's kind of gross. It's
I
like
yeah,
like it.
jelly. It's like
it's a
a
jelly and a powder.
powdered sugar over a top of like a square jellied, not firm enough, kind of like
Yeah.
Mm.
I remember we got it on set and we were like, and poor Skander was like, this is awful. Like he had to
Oh
eat
yeah,
it.
he had to eat it. Oh.
Yeah.
And he had it all over his face, which was so
Hmm.
like true to like a kid eating sweets. So it's like just everything.
Yep. But in the
But
book, my memory of what Turkish delight was, because I'm American, I have no idea. To me, it was like chocolate. Like
That was
I
like a,
just
yeah, like a truffle or something.
Yes, I
yeah.
just did not picture what it when even as an adult, I was like, "Oh, that's what Turkish delight is? Oh god." My memory of it as a kid was like the best, most
Yeah.
fabulous dessert ever. Like, yeah, chocolate truffles or something.
But they
And
I
make
it
mean,
it
anything that
sound
comes in
so
that
good.
crystal
Yeah.
dish is gonna, it's gotta be good, right? You would
And even the
hope.
way he's chewing it makes you like want it. He's like, oh, this is so good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
uh and she's like, oh, I'm the queen here and I don't have any heirs of my own, but you're like such a smart, clever boy. And he has like the candy all over his face. And
And she kind of picks up right away, like, on the vibe. Like, he says something like, "Would my brother have to come?" And she's like, "Oh,
uh,
there's a little
You
yeah.
need
dissonance here."
servants
Like,
as a king. You need
yeah,
servants.
she totally picks up
Yeah.
on
She's
she
manipulative.
good, she good.
Yeah. She knows how to play people. I mean, I love this witch character. I think she's probably one of the best witches in
Yeah.
cinema literature history. Like she's just so good. And part of that is because she's not like ugly. Like I remember when we did the play as kids, some kids like didn't get at first that she was bad because, she's pretty, she's in a white dress,
Mhm.
she's
Mm.
not like green and cackling. But that kind of like hidden
It's the
manipulation.
temptation, right?
Yeah. Uh So she's like, yeah, go. My house is in between those two hills. Come bring your siblings, and I'll make you, the heir of Narnia. And he wants all. He's like, can I have more Turkish delight? And she's like, no. She's like, no. Uh,
I have a room that is full of it at my castle. If you bring your siblings. He's not even like, but why? He's just like, okay.
yeah, because it is enchanted candy. That is
Yes.
something that you pick up on, but
Yeah.
in a book it's stated, but you pick up on that, like, yeah, he's kind of a little shit, but like the candy is,
He's been not
Oh, he's been
yeah,
poisoned.
dosed.
Yeah, dose.
yeah.
That's a good word for it.
Yeah, because Lucy runs into him after she leaves and is like, "You look awful." And he's like, "It's freezing. I'm cold."
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
already he's
interesting.
got a secret, right? He's
Yeah.
secretive
Yes.
about
Hmm.
yeah.
Mm.
I it's really cool because like with Tilda and Skandar, the two actors, like Tilda is a fascinating, as you know, she's a fascinating performer, and she was very involved with like the outside in look of the White Witch. She really was talking to the costume designer a lot. Like she really, I think she also was like into fashion. I think
Yeah.
she just, so she does sort of like the outside in, but she, I remember with Skandar reading with him, like, when we were looking for Edmund, and he was so confident, like, he was such a little baller, like, he had such innate talent to him, like, and even in scenes with Tilda, who's, like, so incredible, he's just like yeah, he just holds his own, like, it's just an amazing like, he just had this sort of he's a brilliant boy. He was a brilliant boy, and he's a brilliant adult. Like, he is actually, like, this like, I don't know, he's saving the world somewhere and, like, doing political stuff, but, like, he's really, really smart, and he just had such an air of, he just was so easy with it, and
Mm.
he was probably the most, like, naturally gifted. All of the kids were amazing. He just sorta had this sort of talent, and all of them were like, yeah, Scanner's just, like, crazy talented. But anyway, like, to hold a scene with Tilda is not easy, and he
Mhm.
just didn't really care, like, in a great way. Like, he
Yeah.
just did it he's like, if you were to blow it up, it's like, I probably don't like, acting is just one thing I'll probably do in my life,
Mm.
but it's not
Yeah.
like my like, he just sorta had this kinda like, I'll be yeah,
I guess I'll be
I'm
in
in
like
this
a giant franchise for a little
yeah, I'll
bit.
be in this moment. And
Casual.
he just that ease was just like I was like, I'm just riveted by this kid. He's just
Mhm.
amazing.
It is amazing how much he grows, not just as a character, but like physically through the movie. like by the end of the
Oh
movie, he
God.
like looks like an almost different
That was
child
a
than the one.
thing. Like, that's why we had to shoot in order because as much as we could,
Oh,
because kids,
yeah.
these kids at 8, 12, 16, and 17, or however their ages were when we started, they vastly grow within. We shot this movie for like 10 months. A lot changes in that time.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there were breaks in, but it's like, yeah, a boy at that age, his voice changes in like 3
Mm-hmm.
months. So he's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, he totally grew up. By the time he's on the battlefield, it's like, thank God we shot in order because,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
he's different.
Uh and so they run out back to Lucy takes him back to Earth, and they're like, Lucy's like, we're here, we saw it again, I went again, and this time Edmund went too. And they're like, Edmund? And he's like, oh, I was like playing along, I just for the fun of it. And they're like,
Oh,
oh.
double betrayal.
And yeah, her
Such a
face
dick
is
Oh,
move.
just like, oh.
yeah.
Like
Major dick
I would
move.
run out crying too. Honestly, I was like same.
And that's
Yeah.
just mean, right?
Yeah,
That's just hardcore mean.
Yeah.
That's probably the first thing he does. It's like, that's really mean.
because these
Mm-hmm.
little children just don't know when to stop pretending.
Yeah, he's just like vile to her.
Yeah. And which is how a lot of kids probably reacted to that kind of situation,
And
in the war. Like kids can be mean to their siblings, especially at that age, like anyone,
yeah,
to feel like some kind of dominance.
yeah. And I have to say, like, with all the like not knowing that he went to like this special
Hmm.
or the school like where he became a bully, I think like having the background of like they're all going through a tough time and they're all processing in different ways, like lends the fact that like he's not like inherently bad. He's just being mean
Yeah.
because,
Yeah, the movie
part of
doesn't
his processing is like gaining control in some way. So
yeah, it doesn't excuse the behavior, but it is like you
it's a
have empathy
reason
for
why
it.
it's
Yeah.
happening and
And
you can
yeah, because
understand it.
Peter, also teenage boy, is like trying to be the dad but isn't, and is like pushes him on the bed.
Totally.
Yeah.
And Lucy runs out crying. She just runs it at the professor, and
Yeah.
first adult she
Mm.
sees, she's like just
Yeah.
hugging him.
It's Professor Slughorn dressed up as Lemony Snicket. That's what I said. Because he has like Lemony Snicket hair, but I know that's Professor Slughorn. Or for people
Oh,
like Bridget Jones, it's Bridget Jones' dad.
totally.
Um, I mean, he's in a lot of other stuff, but Americans,
Jim
that's what I
Broadbent.
pinpoint.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny.
And the professor is like, Susan, Peter, let's cut, like, let's talk. And he does this thing where he's like, well, like, who do you believe more? Like, who's more truthful? And they're like, well, that's insane. Like, you can't find a magical country in the wardrobe. And it's like, well, is she crazy or is she
Well,
lying?
I love what she says that she found a magical land in the wardrobe. He was like, what was it like? She's like, it's like talking to a lunatic. He's like, no, the magical world that she found. That still hit really great. Like that was fantastic.
I
Like talking
love
to a lunatic.
I love Susan in this watch. Like,
Yeah.
she was
I love
so funny
Anna.
to me in this like rewatch. I was like,
Mm,
yeah, she's the baddest
She
bitch
has
around. Yeah.
great reactions.
yeah.
Her like tracking of all of it is so underplayed, but so good.
I
And because
mean,
She's
I
so
loved
brilliant.
reliving my favorite line was, did that bird just psst at us?
it
That's my favorite line.
well, because it
She
never
does have some
goes.
really good one-liners, doesn't she?
Yeah,
Mhm.
and it never goes into full on self-aware. Like, it doesn't break the tone where
No,
she's like,
no.
"Why is this?" It's like very much like, okay, but she goes along with it eventually, but she's like, "This
Yeah.
is a little crazy, right?"
Yeah, because
Mhm.
she's the straight man in this, comedy, essentially. Like
Yeah.
she's like trying to hold the logic together.
And he's
Yeah.
like, well, if Edmund is usually the liar and Lucy usually tells the truth, and she's not crazy, then she must be the one telling the truth.
Mhm.
And he's like, what do they teach in schools these days?
There you go. There's the anti-school stuff
Oh,
there.
sentiment,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it makes more sense coming from the professor than like the omniscient narrator. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So they're playing outside and they're playing cricket, but Lucy's reading, and then Edmund like Peter hits Edmund with the ball first, so then Edmund's
Yeah.
annoyed. And then Edmund hits it and it breaks through the glass, like the stained glass window, and it knocks over a suit of armor. And Lucy makes this face when it knocks. She's like reading. She's like, and kind of that thing like, you're about to get in trouble, and I'm mad at you, so I'm happy about it.
Oh God. I remember all of these moments.
Mm.
So weird. I remember like the day that we shot them. Like I love you guys walking it through like this. It's so crazy.
Yeah, it's different when I'm sure when you lived it, like you saw this happen, and
No, but it was so special though. And even I think even for all of us there and the kids too, like I think we all still feel like that movie was really unique. Everybody was out of their comfort zone. Nobody was from New Zealand except for the crew and Andrew. And like everyone was like, I guess we're living here now. So everybody became family. And so I just remember that day. Yeah. Because
yeah,
it's interesting story wise, because Edmund comes back and he could just say when Lucy says and Edmund was there too, he could right then go, yeah, let's all go, right? Let's all
yeah,
go because his mission is to get the White Witch and to get them all
Yeah.
there. But maybe in a nice twist, he doesn't go along with Lucy because he's maybe still processing. I don't know what his backstory is,
yeah,
but like there's a reason why another day passes. Like,
yeah.
another day in the drudgery of the mansion passes before they all go back in. And they go back in because they're running away from
The
Mhm.
McCready,
the McCready.
because they hit the
The ball
suits of
went.
armor, and I think the movie actually balances more than in the book. When you read the book, so much of the book is the pre all the kids in Narnia.
Mm.
And the movie I think balances it a little more. We get to spend a little more time in Narnia because as a kid that
Mm.
was always like my favorite part, right? When they're all on the adventure. Uh
Mhm.
so I like that they set up more because it's a movie, so they don't have like we set more of the backstory, but they don't.
Linger too long.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
like
yeah,
that was a thing where it's like, okay, what a minute, what are they in the wardrobe? We can't like wait too long. They have to get
Right.
to it. But yeah.
But it's just enough to establish all of their characters and just the conflicts they're taking into the world.
yeah,
It's like the perfect amount.
I don't remember as a kid in reading the book that Lucy went back again and that Mr. Tumnus
Mm.
was okay. Did you
yeah,
remember that? Did
yeah.
that
I
happen in the book?
it
Oh,
does
so
happen.
because
Yeah,
she goes back the night that Edmund follows her and meets the White Witch, it's
Mhm.
because she goes to visit Mr. Tumnus and he's fine.
Yeah.
yeah,
Like, or he hasn't been found out yet. So that's a good news thing that I forgot watching the movie again. I'm like, oh my God, that's right.
Hmm.
I
because
don't know that that was in the book.
Edmund spills that, oh, she met some fawn named Tumnus.
Yes,
Mm.
he's the one who tells the White Witch. Oh,
Yeah.
that's why he gets caught.
He
Oh,
gets,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Edmund.
so it's the
Oh,
witch definitely tries to be like, yeah, this is all Edmund did this like manipulatively, but he actually was just kind of like, I just met strange people and I'm at any this is what I know. Like
Yeah,
how
exactly. It's
uh
it's one of those situations where you're like you just like slap your hand on your head. You're like, Edmund, shut up. But it's
yeah,
like you get it.
and
You
Mr.
get why it's
Tumnus would have
happening.
made it out. Like nobody would have found out if Edmund
yeah.
hadn't like
Yeah.
outed him to the White Witch. Yeah.
They find the wardrobe as they're running, and Susan is like, no, like I'm not going in. She is so done. And they're like, we all gotta run in. And Peter leaves it slightly open. He doesn't close it all the way. And they enter Narnia, and they're all like, oh my gosh. And Peter looks
Lucy's
to
like, told you.
yeah, because he's like, I suppose I'm sorry isn't good enough. And she's like, no. And then she hits him with a snowball. But like, that might be good enough. And they're playing with the snowballs and it hits Edmund. He's like, ouch. And they're like,
Wait, you're coming to my favorite moment. One of them. Keep going.
they're like, wait, you knew, like, you little liar. And he's like, apologize to Lucy. He's like, I'm sorry. And she's like, some little children just don't know when to stop pretending. That was like the highlight of her life at that moment. She
Oh,
was like
absolutely.
so ready.
Honestly, maybe for the rest of her life.
Yeah,
Sick burn.
Hmm.
she had that ready. Uh, and they're like, okay, well, where do you want to go? She's like, I want you all to meet Tumnus. And they're like, but it's cold. And Peter's like, well, we'll take the coats because we're not leaving the wardrobe, logically, to
Technically,
Susan.
so
And
good.
he gives Edmund a girl's coat. He's like, this is a
That's
girl's
a
coat.
girl's coat. Yeah,
I
that's
know.
so funny. So much like lovely little character gems, right? Like it's just
Mhm.
character driven moments, like tiny little moments.
Because yeah, there are times in the book where the kids are just like so British, I guess, where it's like they're just kind of very like, by Jove, let's go do this. And I think this doesn't modernize them too much, right? It still feels timeless, but it is focused a little less on like the proper British behavior and more like how kids
Real.
are, siblings, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
jabbing
Mhm.
at each other, and like they love each other, but they're also always all annoyed with each other. And
Yep.
they're walking in the snow, and they see Tumnus's house, and it's been broken into, and Lucy goes running, and they're like, whoa, whoa,
Lucy's
whoa,
reaction is very intense.
because
She's
it's
just
scary.
like
It's her
she's
friend's
just like
house.
eyes wide, and then she just bolts, and then they're like, "You can't just run in there."
And they find it ransacked, and there was a letter from the head of the secret police because he was fraternizing with humans.
Not much of a
And
secret, though.
yeah, this is a public
I said
secret
that
police.
out loud to myself. I was like, not much of a secret because they left a letter.
But it's very Gestapo. I think that's
Yes, yeah.
intentional in the book, and that comes across in the movie, that like, oh, he was
Mhm.
hiding traitors and enemies of the
Mhm.
state and Her
Hmm.
Majesty. And Susan's like, hey, we need to go. And Lucy's like, no, this is my fault. Like, this is because of me. I'm the
Okay, I
human.
have a
We need to help
question.
him.
Who wrote the letter though? Because he's a wolf. There's a paw print, but who wrote the letter?
So maybe there's like a goblin in the castle who like
Okay,
writes
okay.
out the letter,
Or
and then he prints it.
text to
The text
writing.
message.
Like Shazam too. Spoiler alert.
That's a very good question.
Yeah, because I was like, oh yeah, it's so weird that like, and then it turns out to be a wolf, and I was like, well, wait a second, who wrote that letter?
I mean, my question is always, and it's not like a real question. Like, I don't actually want an answer. It's
Yeah,
magic,
please do
but
not
like,
remake the movie and give me the answer like
we're
you
looking at
did
you,
with
Beauty and the Beast
Beauty and the
remake.
Beast 2017.
But where like, because everyone not only speaks English but writes in English, like they can read. It's like a different
Yeah.
world, and they like can read the writing. But it's like, I don't need like a Lord of the Rings Elvish language. Like, it's fine. Like, it's just like a funny
Mm.
little,
Yeah.
yeah, uh,
But that's in the book too, right? Like, didn't Mogram write a note in the
yeah.
book? Yeah,
He
no,
did,
that's in the
yeah.
book. That's from the book. Oh, yeah,
A wolf with excellent penmanship. I'm
Yeah.
impressed.
and are very articulate.
Yes.
And so they're like, let's go, and that's when the bird is. Did that bird at us?
Love
That bird,
it.
psst, at us, at us. She goes at us. Yeah.
And they go out into the snow, and we see another kind of like, ooh, there's someone shifting in the snow. What kind of animal is it? And then it's a beaver. It's Mr. Beaver.
I
Mr. and
love
Mrs. Beaver.
this moment.
When he puts out his hand,
And
like,
Peter's like,
come,
he's like, what does he say to it?
I'm
He's
not
like, I'm
gonna
not gonna
smell
sniff
it.
it if that's what you're looking for. So good. Mr.
And
Beaver, excellent.
and he clocks, okay, this is Lucy Pevensey. Here's your handkerchief from Tumnus.
Mhm.
And they're like, okay, he's like, you got to come with me because there are spies everywhere. And they're like, how do we know we can trust him? And Peter's like, well, he knows the fawn. And Susan says, he's a beaver, he shouldn't be saying anything.
Anything. Yes, it's like just enough of like the reminding us of the logic. It's like we have three people, three of these kids who are like invested in it, and then we still have one person clinging to reality until finally she's like, I
Always.
can't. I
And
Yeah.
can't. This is reality.
that is kind of like a really cool like under thing for Susan though, because it supports it in the books too that like this is all just a little too much
Yeah.
for her. Like she's probably a little too old to go there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yet she's
Interesting.
able to in Lion Witch, but Prince Caspian is like, yeah, it starts to get really too much for Susan. She wants to
Yeah.
be like she wants to be, advancing from like the childlike stuff. So like I
Hmm.
think this is like really brain breaking for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
wants it to be like factual and in books and stuff that makes sense.
Hmm.
But I do like that the movie, at least this movie, and the other characters, like Peter, like her and Peter bicker at each other because they're like these pseudo parents. But like
Right.
they like no one is like shaming her for that. Like there's
Right.
no like, oh, why don't you believe in me? They don't have some kind of like Polar
Mm-mm.
Express believe in magic plot. Like it's just kind of like,
Right.
yeah, we get it. It's a little weird, Susan, but Like,
You know what? We got to go along with it because we're here now. And
yeah.
apparently there's Gestapo. So
And they go to the Beaver's Dam, which again, so cute, so
so cute and
cozy.
cozy.
Mhm.
Okay, if I had to pick a house, I think I would pick the Beaver's house
That's
because it was just
that's
like
yeah.
extra cozy.
And we meet Mrs. Beaver, who is one of my favorite
So
characters.
good.
Love her.
Dawn French.
She was always, whenever we did like the play as kids, like Mrs. Beaver was always the funniest actor. Like,
Yeah.
because a lot of girls like didn't want to be Mrs. Beaver because they thought like, okay, like she's like the frumpy like Beaver lady. And then the girls that did were like the girls that liked being funny on stage and like
Yeah.
being like, I don't want the witch messing with my sewing machine, which you know what? I wouldn't want my fascist dictator messing with my stuff either. Like, get out of my house.
I was
Uh,
trying to find a picture and I had no luck of it. So Andrew and I were Mr. and Mrs. Beaver all the time on set when we were acting with the kids. So there's pictures somewhere. I don't know. The set photographer took pictures of us like crouched down, eye line level to where like, and like we're like arguing with each other, like at the dinner table when we're talking about
I love
the
that.
prophecy and everything, like all that stuff. Because, and again, we wanted the kids to feel like they weren't acting with tennis balls
Yeah.
and that we were real. So like, yeah, we were just game. We were doing like the director is totally doing Mr. Beaver lines and I'm his assistant. And we're just like
I love
bickering with the
that.
kids and it was so fun. Somewhere there's a picture of it. I don't know. But like
yeah.
the set was little. Like the set like we were had to like duck to get in there. But it was fun.
Mhm.
But I mean, everything does feel very real, whether it's just how the kids are acting or the fact that the sets are physically there and they're not like
Mhm.
CGI'd. They're like, we're in a beaver hut, you know, like
Mhm.
it. And I think this
Mm.
was just the right mix of CGI and live action. You know, I think the CGI in it has aged remarkably well.
Oh my
Uh,
God. I mean, I think the beavers and also I mean all the mythical creatures I think look really good. But
yeah.
also like Aslan, like also like comparing it to Lion King, the live action, uh, is like incredible because these CGI animals are giving emotion more
Yeah.
than Simba did.
In that
Sorry, but
remake. Yeah.
and this is 2005. Like I
Yeah.
think they all look so good. Like those beavers, I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah.
Are you sure there weren't actual beavers? You can tell us.
Oh, I would. I wish.
Yeah,
No.
it was so good. Very good.
Yeah. No, I think this is that right mix of the aesthetic where like having those real physical effects, I think really I'm always a fan of like I'd rather see something physically done than just CGI. I think CG is such a powerful tool, but when overused, it like dilutes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh
and it's really cool, like, because they could have just had a representative set, but for the kids' imagination too, like, I think having them be able to walk in the room and be like, "That's what they cook with," and,
Mhm.
like, touch things and, like, that was a really cool choice that was made. I mean, it was
yeah.
still on a soundstage, like, the set was, like, they had to it was, like, real world where and then they got to walk in and be like, "Ooh,"
Yeah.
Yeah.
so
It's just like
that's cool.
those details I bet make the acting experience just easier for them, but it also just makes helps them get to like that very real place of like this is happening, just like making it so authentic and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they shoot Mrs. Beaver serves fish and chips. Just
And
like
it looks
wood chips.
nasty.
What's I
Oh
don't
man.
remember
Yeah,
that.
the actual yeah, because it was like those don't look like fries. But like the fish looks like bad. It's but she tries, you know.
Yeah, and they're talking about like Narnia. They say like you're bringing hope here. Like there is hope for Mr. Tumnus because like we can't get him from the witch's house, but there's hope. Um, because Aslan is on the move, and we get the shots of like that feeling, which is something they talk about in the book, how like the name of Aslan, how it makes them
Mm,
feel, and like this kind of
Mhm.
feeling of like strength and hope. Uh, and they're like, "Who's Aslan?" And he's like, "You don't know who Aslan is?" And Mrs. Beaver is like, "Well, explain it to them." The
Yeah, because oh my gosh. He because also like he's having a hard time coming to grips with reality that he's being faced with people who have no idea what he's talking about.
It
yeah,
it it's and it right, and what they're doing is they're delivering, like, a bunch of
Just
what's the
exposition.
exposition.
Yeah.
That's all
Yeah.
they're doing, but it's
But
active because the audience they're talking to has no clue. And you're also
uh-huh.
telling us that we're like heroes or something? What are you talking
Yeah.
about? Yeah, so
Yeah.
But they do it really well, and he's the top geezer. He's the king of the whole wood. And they also say they don't even know about the prophecy, and it's
It's like
uh
they don't even know about the prophecy. He's so
he's
mad.
so
I love
annoyed
it.
with them.
I love it.
Ray
uh
Winston did that. That's funny.
when Adam's flesh and Adam's bones sit on Caraparavellum throne, the evil time will be over and done. And I love this line. Susan's like,
And she's like,
that
it doesn't
doesn't really
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 rhyme.
rhyme.
Like, brutal. Like, she's so funny. And they're like, that's not the point. But she's right, it doesn't rhyme. Like, you couldn't
It
have written
doesn't.
another verse, Clive Lewis Staples. Uh, but they're like, okay, so they need 4 sons of Adam, or 2 sons of Adam, 2 daughters of Eve to sit on the throne, and that will mean the end of the witch. We have to go meet an army. And they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then Susan's like, we need to leave. And they're like, wait,
Yeah.
where's Edmund? And the Beaver is like, has he been to Narnia before? So Edmund snuck off. Now, in the book, Hannah's going to be very surprised who's about to come up. So in the book, they specify that the witch is not human, and that she is descended from Adam's first wife, Lilith.
Listen, I love Lilith. A little backstory for our guest and also for the listeners and viewers. I have been kicking around an idea centered around Lilith for a very long time. So I'm obsessed with Lilith, obsessed with this idea. Really, you know what? I'm not surprised that it's not explicitly explained in this movie, especially if like there's going to be a sort of leaning more into the Christian sentiment, but also like people who are just common Christians are like, Lilith, what? I don't know what that means, and so they'd be like, that's fake.
Yeah.
So it makes
Fake
sense.
news. What is say it again?
So
Lilith
Lilith
is who?
is Adam's first wife, and she's from, I think, like Hebrew Jewish lore, and she sometimes is like a demon who like eats children. But the
There's
story is that
yeah,
if Eve was made from Adam's rib, Lilith and Adam were made at the same time. They were equals,
separate
and
and equal.
and she did not want to take the submissive role in sex. And so Adam's like, well, you have to. And so she walked out of Eden. She was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And then obviously, independent woman is a child eating demon.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
But so
Yeah.
that's so she's a jinn, because I think in some traditions, like jinn or like spirits are the descendants of Lilith, or Adam and Lilith. And then the White Witch is also part giantess, they say.
Oh, that makes sense.
So I'm like, so technically this prophecy should be Eve's flesh and Eve's bone, because Eve is the common ancestor here. So I'm just saying.
Let's give it up
Nice.
for Eve.
Give it
She
up for Eve.
deserves a little bit more respect than she gets in
And
the Bible.
yeah.
Yeah, she's the first person that had to do childbirth. Like, that had to be weird.
And terrifying and painful, and also there's no medicine, so like,
I mean, if you guys ever saw Blue Lagoon, those kids had no idea what they were doing. And then
True.
suddenly they're just hooking up, and then a baby comes. They didn't know. I don't
Yeah.
know if you saw Blue Lagoon, but they had a lot of learning to do.
So speaking of people that have a lot of learning to do, these kids are running after Edmund, who just walks into the witch's house, and the Beaver is like, you can't take the bait. Like, she wants all of you. And Susan is like, this is all your fault, Peter. We should have left when we had the chance. And he's like, how is this my fault? And they're like fighting. He's like, you're trying to be smart. And Lucy is like, fighting isn't helping Edmund. Like, youngest child mediator. I relate to that. Like, just like, we don't need to fight about this. And Mr. Beaver's like, the only one that can help him now is Aslan. So they have to go get Aslan. So Edmund is walking into the ice palace. I love the way it's designed, like the ice and stone, and it's like cold, and we see all the statues.
Very Medusa-esque. That's what I picture Medusa's house looking like.
Yeah, all these
just
warriors
people she
frozen.
accidentally looked at or purposely looked at.
Her collection of stone, yeah.
And it reminds me kind of like Ursula's lair in The Little Mermaid too, how like you have to walk past all the people she's duped before.
Yes. All the little worms in jars.
Yeah. And he draws a mustache on a stone lion. He's a 10-year-old boy. And
Yep.
then
Just to remind us all, he is a child.
and the wolf jumps out at him. He thinks it's a statue, and he's like, "Oh, I'm here to see the queen." And he's like, "Oh, come on, fortunate favorite of the queen, or not so fortunate." And he goes into the throne room, and no one's there, and so he takes a seat on the throne.
Bad idea, dude.
I know, but
He
as a
takes
kid, like if there's a
helping
big
himself.
chair in a room, you want to
Yeah,
sit on
why
it.
not? Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Oh, do you like it?" And this is where she's like, "Are your sisters deaf? Is your brother unintelligent?" And he's like, "Well, I think so, but mom says."
Right. Still not getting it. Still
And
not
she,
getting the danger you're in.
yeah, and she's like, "How dare you come alone?" And then suddenly he's like, "Oh," and she's like, "I asked so little." And he's like, "They're close. They're at the Beaver's dam." And she's like,
Ooh.
"All right, wolves, let's go, girls." And
Bam, bam,
the
bam, and down, down.
and the wolves
Chases on.
the wolves start running, and he's like, "Oh, can I have more Turkish delight?" And she's like, "Okay."
She's like,
And
it's time to go to prison.
yeah, and this line always stuck with me as a kid for whatever reason, when the dwarf is like, "This way for your num nums."
Yes,
I don't know. I
this way
always
for
remember.
your. I also, yes,
It's creepy. It's a
but
creepy
it's also
line.
so funny. I don't know. Maybe it's just like, maybe because like I'm a lot older and I heard that and I was like, it's sort of like our previous guest and friend Katrina, who said that she has to like speak lines and like do. I have started doing that. I was watching the D&D movie, and there was this crazy thing that happened, and there was like a baby cat, humanoid cat thing, hard to explain, but it was like an animatronic, but it was like moving like this, and so I literally turned in the theater to my boyfriend and went, so yeah, so I literally said that out loud. I was like, this way for your num nums. I don't
It's
know.
so
It's
creepy.
so weird.
Ginnebrick is so creepy.
Which I
Yeah.
think the movie just gave him that name, and I always thought it was like canon, because there's a dwarf, I think, in Prince Caspian called Nickabrick, and they're like, I think,
Oh,
supposed to be distantly descended from each other, and so
yes.
Ginnebrick makes sense.
Yes.
But so I always just thought, "Oh, that's the name," and then they're like, "Oh, in the movie they gave him the name," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess that is in the movie." Uh, and they put him in jail with bread and like frozen like milk or water, like he like tips it over.
Yeah.
Uh, and meanwhile, the siblings are fleeing the dam, with the while the wolves are coming. They had real dogs for this, right? Or
Yeah,
some of the
they did. Yeah, they had some real wolves on set. Well, yeah, half husky wolves, but the dad was a wolf, proper. Oh, there was a whole like, animal crew or,
Mhm.
animal wranglers, and these dogs were on set and they were beautiful. The guy who had these dogs raised them as puppies, and the dad was a full wolf, right? And the mother was like a mix or whatever. So they were raised for this purpose to become show dogs or whatever. But they were raised with a bulldog. Is that a bulldog? Like there was a bulldog that was their like puppy wrangler dog. They're like a happy
Yeah,
friend
Like a
dog,
companion.
a companion dog. So
Mhm.
yeah.
when they were puppies, this dog was like maybe a year old. So they were now adult dogs, but like treated, this dog would enter in, they'd be like beta immediately. So this
Uh-huh.
dog became alpha to them. Like no matter what dynamic was going on, this little like smaller dog would come in and it'd be like, they'd all go, "Ooh," they just like turn their little tails would tuck under it. And this dog was like so much smaller than them, but because their little brains were like, that dog is
Mhm.
our alpha. So anyway, it was
Yeah.
just like a funny little, I was like, "Oh my God, like how are these big, huge dogs just towering to this little tiny dog?" Anyway, I thought that was so cool.
I love
I love
that.
those dogs. Those dogs were so cool.
And again, it adds to like the realism of like you see the dogs running, and that it's like a high intensity situation, and Mrs. Beaver is like packing, like, "Do you think we need jam?" "Not
Yeah.
unless the witch serves toast." But I'm like, they're going on a road trip. Like everyone knows a snack run is a part of a road trip. Like
Yeah.
it's
I don't think there's
winter.
any Circle K's around. I
Yeah.
know.
You can't
Um,
like eat nuts and berries because there's snow
but
everywhere.
then
It's
it
like she
turns
needs to.
out they clearly bring jam because later on they couldn't bring a map because there wasn't any room because of the jam.
Yeah.
That's what he
This is
says.
Yeah,
And
there
I was
wasn't any room
like,
next to the jam.
but you know what? Priorities. I also would have brought the jam.
And they're running in the caves that take them to Badger's house. And she's like, you said I went to your mom's. And they arrive at this whole little village of cute little animals, like the badgers and squirrels and the boar, and they've all been turned to stone because they were helping Tumnus. And this fox shows up, and they're like, "Oh, are you like a bad guy?" And he's like, "No, no, I'm on your side." And he's like, "Hide up in this tree," and he like tells the wolves, "Oh, they went that way." They're like, "We're tired." He's like, "Oh yeah, no, they're that way." And so they have a scene where they're like around the fire, and the fox is saying like, "I'm here. I've seen Aslan. I'm gathering troops for him." Like, and Susan's like, "We were sent away from a war." And they're like, we have to help these people. But meanwhile, Edmund is in the
He's in ice jail.
he's in ice jail with next to Tumnus, and he's like, "Oh, Tumnus," and he's like, "Oh, you have the same nose," and he's like, "Is Lucy okay?" And he's like, "I don't
I
know."
don't know.
And she's like, the witch comes in, is like, "We tore that dam apart. Your family wasn't there." And he's like, "Oh, they said something about like Aslan," and she's like, "What?" And Mr. Thomas is like, "He doesn't know anything. Like, don't listen to him." And she's like, "Take him away," to Mr. Tumnus, and she's like, "You know why you're here?" And he's like, "Because I believe in a free Narnia." And she's like, "No, because he turned you in for sweets," which isn't 100% the true, but it's
Right.
true enough to get
Exactly.
to Edmund.
The guilty,
Yes.
Yeah.
guilty. He's got to have a turn coming up. I think that's where he's like, that's where he starts to be like, I'm the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
And now I feel really bad. And I met Mr. Tumnus. He's a real person. I turned him in. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's the shit hitting the
And
emotional fan.
I just kind of realized this now. I mean, I've joked before that, Narnia is the Bible plus, or it's my favorite version of this story. Like, I think it's better than Passion of the Christ. But like, I think it's interesting is that the character who is always pushing guilt is the villain. So he's always trying to make Edmund feel bad. And like Aslan doesn't like ignore the things that happened, but he's not
He
focusing
doesn't.
on guilt.
Yeah.
Whereas the guilt is the witch's tool to like manipulate
Yeah.
Edmund after she's tricked him.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
she's obviously
Shame. Because
not.
shame is powerful, right?
Yeah, and she's
Shame.
obviously not being like, well, I basically convinced you sneakily to tell me
Yeah.
everything. Because at this point, when he's giving her more information, it's not because like he wants to do something bad. It's because he thinks it's going to save himself in the moment. Like he's trying
He's
to protect
scared.
himself. Yeah. And so it's like, yeah, it's crazy.
A lot
And
of pressure to put on a kid.
yeah, he's in a scary situation, and he
Yeah.
leaves, and Tumnus is turned to stone. And the witch is like, "I will be there with no bells on the sleigh this time." And they are running through, they're charging through the snow, and the kids are walking through the snow. And Peter's like, if he tells us to hurry one more time, I'm turning him into a big fluffy hat. And then they hear a carriage with bells, and they're like, "It's her!" And they like run, and they're hiding. And Mr. Beaver's like, "Oh, I gotta go check on this." And Mrs. Beaver, because he's like, "Oh, you're no use to Narnia dead." And Mrs. Beaver is like, "Neither are you." I'm like, we love a supportive marriage.
Is
And
this
They might bicker, but they love each other.
yeah. So Father Christmas, Santa Claus, Father Christmas, if as
Has
anyone
to
who's
give the
been to
gifts.
Epcot knows, yeah, he's Father Christmas in some countries. Yeah. He shows up, and
I know him as the leader of the Night's Watch, actually.
That
So
actor, yes. Oh my God.
he was killed
Totally.
in the show, and it was devastating.
well,
Rough.
here he's Santa
Here
Claus.
he lives,
Here
and
he's
he
Father
is
Christmas.
living.
And he's like, the witch's magic is weakening. I've been away for a long time. I got a lot of gifts to deliver. And he gives Lucy a healing cordial from the fire flower that one drop will heal any injury, and a knife. And he's like, "I don't expect you to participate in battles." And she's like, "I think I'm brave enough." And it's like, battles are ugly affairs, especially for an 8-year-old girl. Like, don't put her on the front lines, please. And then he gives Susan a bow and arrows, and she's like, "What happened to battles are ugly affairs?" Though in the book it was something a little more sexist. It was like, when battles are ugly when women fight. So this was
Totally
a good way to
sexist.
kind of It was written in 1949. We
Yeah, no,
can
there's a
update
lot
it a
of that
little.
in there. There's
Yeah.
definitely a lot of that know your place kind of thing going
Yeah.
on.
And he also gives her a horn that summons help. Uh, Boromir didn't need it anymore, so he had a horn.
Right.
And then he gives Peter a sword and a shield and says these are tools, not toys. But I'm pretty sure you could buy that toy set in Target when it came out. Uh, yeah, and they have these weapons. He's off to spread Christmas cheer, and they're crossing this river, which is slowly breaking up because spring is spring. The magic is weakening, and it's all opening. And
Mhm.
Susan, at one point, they're looking over the country, and she's like, "It's so big." And Mrs. Beaver's like, "It's the world, dear. Did you expect it to be small?" She looks at Peter like, "Smaller." Basically, like, "You thought this was a lot smaller when you said, 'Let's go meet Mr. Tumnus,' and here we are now." Uh, and so the river is breaking, and so Mr. Beaver is like checking the river.
Little
And
tail.
Mrs. Beaver's like, you've been getting second helpings, haven't you? Because the ice is cracking a little.
then the wolves show up and they corner them. And they're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, just like we'll just surrender and we'll let you and your family go. That's all that my queen wants. She just wants you to go. Like just because a old man hands you a sword doesn't make you a hero." That's what Susan's saying. And they're like, Mr. Beaver's like,
Mhm.
"Don't listen to him, don't listen to him." And so has to make this decision. He's not really he doesn't have any fighting ability. So real yet. So he just stabs his sword in the ice and it breaks
Mhm.
off, and then the river bursts.
Yeah.
And they're like holding on to the iceberg, and they're all like soaking wet. And I'm like, this is me after leaving Splash Mountain.
Uh-huh.
Like just like drenched. Again, this would be a fun ride.
Oh yeah, that could have been the water part of it.
Yeah. And then Lucy,
Disney, come on. You
come
really
You dropped
missed
on.
the
out.
ball. You dropped the ball.
Yeah. And then Lucy falls off because they get to the shore,
Mm.
and Susan's like, "Where's Lucy?"
He has her
Their
coat.
coat. She says, "What did you do?" Which is funny because, I remember years ago, like my mom, obviously an adult, and her brother, and like something happened with like a phone, like the Wi-Fi. It was like a Wi-Fi, and she's like, "What did you do?" Like first response, like, "What did you do?" That's siblings, but he has but she's okay, and
Yeah,
spring
she's like,
is
has anyone seen my coat?
she's cold, but spring is springing. There's flowers everywhere. And I think in the script version that I saw, there was a scene where Peter meets the Dryad, and she thanks him for awakening her, and he kisses her hand, or she kisses his hand and leaves like a mark.
Hmm.
Um, I see where I was cut because it doesn't really add to the
Move the
It's already
story
a
trajectory.
forward,
long
yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
uh,
Not an important relationship to track.
yeah. But it was yeah, everything's spring now, and the witch is mad. She's mad that it's spring, and her dress is even less white.
Yes, it's
Mhm.
dirtier now, and her sleigh doesn't
She
run. The next time we
looks
see
like
them,
the Midwest in February after everyone's driven over the
that's the
snow.
slush, the
Yeah.
slushy, gross, gross.
Mhm.
And yeah, the dwarf is like, "Oh, it's so warm out," and she's like,
She's
"Excuse me,
like,
is
what
it?"
did you say? It's actually freezing. Keep your coat on.
Uh, and this is the fox comes in, and they're like, "Oh, he was gathering troops," and he's like, "Oh, sorry, Your Majesty," and she's like talking to him, and he's like, "I wasn't talking to you. Like I was talking to him."
That's a big
Wow.
diss. That's some
That's
big
bold
balls. That's some
too.
Yeah,
low hanging fox balls.
Yeah, seriously.
and she's gonna kill him, and Edmund's like, "Wait, yeah, they said something about the stone table," and the fox is like, "Come
Really?
on."
Come on.
But he's just trying to help him, and she's like, "Well, at least he gets to see some honesty before he dies." And she turns him to stone, and Edmund says
Yeah.
no. So then she slaps him,
Yeah.
and then she kills a butterfly. So
For no reason.
villain.
That butterfly wasn't doing anything to anyone
As a kid, though, I
except
was like,
existing.
that butterfly was a spy for Aslan. That butterfly was doing it was doing the
Interesting.
Lord's
Interesting.
work. Yeah. Uh,
Literally doing the Lord's work.
yeah. In the book, there is a similar scene where there's a fox and some satyrs and squirrels, and they're having a Christmas party with like plum pudding, and the witch
Aw.
sees it and is like, "Where did you get this?" They're like, "Father Christmas," and she's like, "No, you didn't. He's not here." And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, no, we didn't." And then the baby squirrel's like, "No, he's here. He's here. He's here." And then she turns them all to stone, and Edmund says, "Stop." And that's when
Mm.
Wow.
she slaps him.
Wow. Well, I guess at least
I think
Edmund
that
only
was a
had to
good change.
see one animal suffer
Yeah.
in that scene instead of a whole family or neighborhood.
Well, that
Yeah.
was the first time that Edmund was trying to make a decision that was to, for the
Helped.
betterment of another
Yeah.
creature, even though it was ill-advised because he outed, again, some pivotal knowledge.
Mhm.
But he was trying to be helpful
Yeah.
and save the
Yeah.
fox.
Because yeah, now he's realized, okay, she's evil and I don't want her to hurt people.
Yeah.
Um, but this is when they arrive, the other siblings arrive at Aslan's camp and they see the Narnian
Mhm.
army. It's all this very like bright reds and golds and like browns. So everything's been so white. And now it's like all you have like the fawns and the centaurs and
And the tent colors are red.
So
Like Aslan's tent
warm.
is such a bright red
yeah.
after
Mhm.
all that white. Yeah.
And yeah, and there's different these dogs and rhinos and leopards and all
Yeah.
these different animals, gorillas, and they yeah, I just love their like anything you can imagine is almost here, you know.
Yep. Real and imagined.
And this is when the tree spirits do wave at Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Uh, and I remember reading they in the script they had a little more with the dryads and naiads, but again, I think you have so many creatures you have to put on set.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to make some choices. Uh,
Another visual effects shot too that you're like,
save
save money,
money.
because there's nothing
Yep.
physical about that,
Right.
probably,
Yeah.
in the
And then
end.
it's like if you have all these pretty ladies, then you're gonna have homeschool moms who are very picky about how they're dressed, you
Oh
know.
yeah, there's a whole mom contingent.
So I'm
Yeah.
one like so even if it was just like, oh, I see her shoulder, like that could be a thing. So it's like maybe they're like, let's just sidestep that. Uh know your audience. And so they present themselves to Aslan, who comes out, Liam Neeson.
Mhm.
uh so warm and so expressive, and Peter is like, he's like, where's the fourth? And Peter's like, or Mr. Beaver says he betrayed them, but Peter's like, it was my fault, I was too hard on him. So we get growth from him taking
Mhm.
responsibility for, because he's not his dad, and he's a kid trying to emulate that, but he's still a kid, he doesn't know like how to parent. uh
Yeah.
and Aslan is like, okay, this is going to be a challenge. um But he's like, okay, let's get ready. Like, welcome. Like, we've been waiting for you. And he shows Peter Cair Paravel on the sea, this castle far off. And he's like, you're gonna rule there. And Peter's like, I just want to keep my family safe. Like, I didn't sign up to be a king. And but Aslan looks down at the camp and is like, well, so do I. Like, he wants to keep his
Mm.
family safe. And
Mhm.
you hear all the creatures chattering and braying and barking. That's his family. And there's also this great scene with Lucy and Susan getting dressed up, and Lucy's like, let's bring mom all these dresses back, like a whole trunk full. And Susan's like, if we ever go back. And then she's like, okay, sorry, I'm such a downer. We used to have fun. And Lucy's like, then you got boring. And she like
Yeah.
is like laughing so much. It's such a cute scene, and they're like splashing water, but then the wolves show up.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And she throws the blanket, she climbs up and blows the horn, and then so Peter runs up, and Aslan is like, everybody wait, like let Peter do this fight. And the wolf Mogrim is like, you may think you're a king, but you'll die like a dog. And she like jumps on him, or he jumps on him, and Peter stabs him with the sword. So I do like that his first kill, he's not even really good at it. He's just like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
ah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Self-defense.
Yep.
And they're like, all right, you're Sir Peter Wolfsbane. And they're like, other Narnians go after, like, the wolf will lead you to Edmund. Uh, in the book, I like this scene that shows like Peter and Susan are like crying and hugging together after this. And they're like, and that's okay in Narnia.
Mhm.
Basically, kind of
Hmm.
like, it's okay to like be concerned after your siblings almost eaten by a wolf.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and the witch is making plans with her Minotaur general, and the dwarf is making fun of Edmund, but then the Narnians come and scoop him up.
Mhm.
Uh, Yeah. And so she's mad at the dwarf because they leave the dwarf all like tied up instead. And she's
Yeah.
like,
Oh my God, I forgot so much of this. I love it.
and we go back and we see to Aslan's camp, we see Aslan talking with Edmund. And again, Lucy sees him and is immediately just like, Edmund. And it's funny because he's been so mean to her. But now she sees him and she's
So
like, I just want to,
happy.
Well, yeah.
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 And they're like, no, 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 wait back. And he's like, no need to talk about what's in the past. as a very different Snow Queen said, the past is the past. And they're like, the girls are hugging him, and Peter's like, okay, get some sleep, because he's still trying to be like tough. Uh, but Edmund is devouring the toast, and they're like, I bet they're happy Mrs. Beaver brought the jam now. Like, Narnia's not gonna run out of toast. And then this is where Peter is like, you guys go home and I'm gonna defend.
Yeah.
And like, because Edmund and Lucy almost died, like it's scary, and Lucy is like, they need all four of us.
Yeah.
And Edmund is like, I've seen the witch, I've seen what she does, like we can't leave these people.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Turns a new leaf.
yeah. And then they're all prepping for the war. Like, we have Susan doing her archery. She's like, I'm gonna go practice then. And Lucy throws the knife. We have them on
She's
the
spot on. So Susan does pretty good, but Lucy throws that knife bullseye. It's like, that's my girl.
and they're on their talking. Edmund has a talking horse, because they go, horsey. He's like, my
The
name's Philip.
sassiest horse.
Philip was our
Yeah.
line producer, Philip Stoyer, and we made him say that line.
I love it. Oh my
My
God.
name's
Yeah. Because he's
Philip.
like, whoa, horsey. He's like, my name is Philip.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great.
Peter's on a unicorn. And but we get news the White Witch is coming. She's on her litter, carried by Cyclops.
Mm-hmm.
And the people are booing her, and she's like, well, I'm here because there's a deep magic, and all traitors, according to the deep magic, belong to me. That one is a traitor. And he has to be sacrificed on the stone table, because Peter's like, come and take it then. Come take him, which was my line as a chipmunk child. I had that line in the play.
Nice.
Yeah. But they're like, he'll be, she's like, you can't deny me my right by force. It's like the deep magic that governs all of Narnia. And she says something about they wouldn't have made very good servants, just to kind of like jab at Edmund, even now that he's back with them. And Aslan invokes the rule of parley from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yep.
He's like, we're gonna talk. And
Parley.
and they're like, I love the scene where they're picking the grass, because that's what I would do as a kid. Like, you're like stuck waiting. You're just, and then, but she's like, well, how do I know you? Because she's renounced her claim, and she's like, how do you know you'll keep your promise? And he roars, and she's just like,
yeah.
I heard they used a different animal's roar because a lion roar was too soft. I thought it was like they used a tiger roar or something.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I thought it was Liam Neeson.
Yeah. He really does know how to roar.
I was like, I'm really glad that he spent all those many months, learning how to roar like a lion to really give a great performance. So.
He was waking up every day playing Katy Perry's Roar, which was not out then.
Not even invented.
Katie was probably your guys' age.
Katie was probably still doing Christian music at this point. Okay.
Oh.
She was, yeah.
She would have fit in perfectly then.
Yeah.
But that night they can't sleep. Susan and Lucy, they see Aslan walking through the woods. And they're comforting him, and they're like, what's wrong? He's like, I'm doing something that is really difficult. And they're like, he's like, we're at the stone table, you have to hide, like make yourself hidden.
I love that moment when Aslan's walking and he actually does need comfort though.
Yeah.
He says, I remember the company.
That was really special as a kid too, because I feel like that was in the animated one too. Like he was like, I would like, and that was very Jesus too. Like, like I would like to not be alone before I'm going to, sacrifice myself or whatever.
Yeah.
So that I always really loved that he just wanted them to be like holding him or have
even though he's like he's a god, or
he thinks he knows what's gonna happen, but not, I don't know. Nobody still wants to go through it.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
And he still needs that human or creature comforts, like that love, that support.
Literally creature comfort.
Yeah. And so he arrives at the stone table where we have the witch and her groupies, and they're all these kind of slimy things.
They're
like
scary.
Yeah, scary, truly scary.
A lot of prosthetics, which I like, again, because it's like they felt very real. And he's like walking up slowly, and like there's that we referenced that harpy once, I think, in Glee
That
Boot.
harpy. I know who exactly you're talking about.
Yeah, she like
Did
gets
we
up there and
reference
it's like
in
screaming
Glee Boot?
because we're
Did
like
we?
everybody's a harpy or something.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yes.
It's like, hey, tag yourself, I'm the harpy in Narnia that like streaks at the lion and flies away. And it's, yeah, just the lighting and her black dress, and they tie him up and they shave him, and the girls are like, why is he letting him do this?
Yeah,
And she says, you sacrifice yourself, but what will that stop me from killing him? Like, you've given me Narnia and you've saved no one.
no one.
So much for love. Another Ursula tie-in. And she says, despair and die, and like stabs him, and we see like his eyes go big. It's said that scene too, it's like you can't do it justice here because it's like there's the pounding torches,
Oh,
it's like
they're
a
horrible. It's the
It's
demeaning too. There's like just
yeah.
humiliation first, like shaving a lion's pride. You know, their mane is like so demeaning, and yeah, they're awful. It's a really I can't imagine being a kid and watching that scene.
Yeah.
yeah.
Horrible.
And they, he dies, and they are like, now we're gonna go claim Narnia forever, like it's ours,
Yeah, she's
and
got those contacts in, her pupils are huge, and she's just like bloodlusted.
and this has, I can't remember if we talked about this before, but the Tolkien concept of the eucatastrophe, which like what makes a fairy tale strong is that there has to be a moment where everything is all is lost, and then there's a moment where suddenly everything switches, goes from all is lost to all is one. But you need that in order for the story to resonate. You need that low of this moment where
Yeah.
it's
That's
like
probably
he's
structurally in every like supposed to be in every movie. Like
yeah.
the lowest low. The note
Yeah,
not
because
a fault.
they run as the army leaves. They run up to him and they're like crying, and they're trying. The mice start undoing the cords. First
And I
he's like,
remember that too. I remember the mice from the book and the animated thing. Like that was like, why are they doing? No, no, no. They're releasing him because even they revere. It's like, oh, I thought they were
yeah.
biting him, but they weren't.
It's just, yeah, it's just a sweet moment too, because Susan is like, get away, and Lucy's like, no, look.
That's
Uh,
totally in the book too. I
yeah,
think that I just really remember that.
Yeah, because he's lying dead on this table out in the middle of nowhere, and like no one else is around except for them. But he's still bound. Like
Yep.
it's still like final humiliation.
Yep.
and they're like, we have to tell the boys. And so this is where they ask the trees, and you see all the trees shaking and the leaves, and those cherry blossoms come in, and the dryad is like, I have news of your sisters. So it adds this element of now they're going to war, and they know that Aslan is dead. And Peter's like, I don't know if I can do this, and Edmund's like, they all believe in you and I believe in you, which everything they've been through, that's like such a powerful moment. So they gather, and there's like this huge army of villains walking towards them, and they're like their little army, and the griffin is like, they have more numbers than our own, and the centaur is like, oh, numbers don't win a battle. Like, gosh, they sure help. They have the griffins and eagles throw rocks on the charging army, and then they do this was like I don't know if it was a full-on meme, but I just remember in college people all the time would say for Narnia whenever they were charging for something.
Yes.
Banania. Yeah.
Yeah, and for
Um,
Aslan, and so they have this big charge. And I know, like, I'm sure I know somewhere someone's like, actually, like, battles don't work like that in that time period because blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, but do they have leopards in those? I was
they
like,
have
were they riding a
rhinos.
unicorn?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's such that clash is like such. I remember in the theater it being like,
A little story about William. William Mosley, who played Peter, is an incredible, like, physical, like, he embraced all of the fighting like a rock. Like, the stunt guy was like, "You could be a stunt person, like, professionally, like, right now." So this kid, he
Wow.
just really like, aced it, and he rode bareback on like, he learned how to horseback ride. I mean, if he did before, I don't know, but, like, he is just, like, amazing, and so he actually that was him riding that
Wow.
horse, and there was a lot of training involved and a lot of but everyone was like, "This kid is, like, other level." That's why in Prince Caspian, they gave him a huge battle because they're like, he just learns fight choreography really well.
I mean, that
Anyway,
I love this battle scene. I love the way they use all the different creatures and the mythical elements. And I know people kind of see Lord of the Rings as like the peak of fantasy battles, but I really like this one because everything, all the creatures are so different. I like the fight
Mhm.
choreography is so visceral. I love this battle scene. I love when they like shoot were you the one that shot the phoenix then?
yes,
You
yes.
shot the
So I
phoenix?
shoot the arrow. I'm up on the ledge with Edmund, and I
Yeah.
I remember because you know, we previs the whole movie. Like the whole movie previs basically means
Yeah.
like there's an animatic of the whole film in shots, and there's a whole department that builds the camera moves for these battles, especially so you know what you're shooting on the day because it's all, you know, like camera moves and like what. Um, and so there was always a centaur shooting an arrow at
Mhm.
the top of by Edmund. I'm like, I want to be that one. I want to be her
That
because I
was a
don't think
good
she'll get
pick.
because I don't think she'll get cut
Yeah.
and I'm not gonna be anything else, and I'm like, "That's a really cool thing," and I got to learn archery, and I was
Yeah.
really good at it, and not like it mattered really, it was like one tiny shot, but it's a cool shot because it, like, the camera goes around and it's like
Yeah,
anyway.
I mean, I had a toy of that phoenix as a kid,
Wow.
Oh,
so
that's
that was
cool.
I love when it, like and there's the fire, and so it allows them to, like, fight more of the like, corner more of the villains, and then she, like, ices it and walks
Yeah.
through. It's such a
She's great. She's so hardcore.
was this a nightmare to shoot the battle scene? Because it's
It
so
took
cool,
it
and
took I mean, I think it was like a month. Like, I can't remember if it was 3 weeks to a month of the shooting schedule was in I can't remember where we shot it. It was in New Zealand still, uh, I think outside of Christchurch or something, but it was beautiful. But, like,
Mhm.
yeah,
yeah,
like, it took forever. Like
yeah. But I mean,
but,
it
you
pays
know,
off.
fun.
It's like
Yeah.
my top fantasy battle. Like, sorry to Minas Tirith and Helm's Deep, but I love this
Wow.
one.
Shaking in
Yeah,
their boots.
keep shaking in their boots. And then, but we cut to the girls, and they walk
Mm,
away, and the stone table breaks, and there's like all this light, and they turn around, and you see Aslan stepping into his glory. Because like, what have they done with him? And no, he's there, and he's roaring, and they're like, there's a deeper magic from even before the dawn of time that if a willing victim sacrifices himself in a traitor's stead, the like magic death itself will work backwards.
Yeah.
mm.
He basically says, like, she thought she knew everything about this dark magic or this deep magic, but she didn't read the runes right, essentially. And it was like, wow.
And why would
Yeah.
she? Because she doesn't see that. She doesn't see
Mm-mm.
the good in anyone, so
Yeah. She would never think
she would
that
never
it
go
could be
that deep.
another. Yeah.
And so they get on his back, and he roars, and then we're back at the fight, and they're fleeing the witch, and they shoot the unicorn, and he's Edmund's on the ground now, and or
Mm,
no, Peter's on the ground. He's off the
Mhm.
unicorn, and the rhino and Aureus the centaur, they fight off the witch, and she's turning them to stone, and she's turning everyone to stone. And Peter's like, Edmund, get the girls, get out of here. But
that's a
Edmund's
low point in
charged.
the battle. Then we
Yeah,
like the big dip of the battle, yeah.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
every battle scene needs that.
Yep.
And then Edmund runs towards the witch, and Mr. Beaver's like, he said leave, and he's like, Peter's not king yet, which I love. I love that line. And he jumps to break the wand, and he misses the first time. I love that. Like, you think it's gonna be, and then they swing around, and he does break the wand, which she then stabs him with.
Yeah.
But now she can no longer turn anyone to stone, which she was like turning all their best warriors to stone. And she has, we've read to mention she's wearing Aslan's mane
Oh
in
yeah,
her,
as her
Oh,
top, or I
yes.
guess maybe it's
Yeah,
part of
like
the
her,
dress, I guess.
yeah,
it's
like
her
a,
this part
yeah,
Hmm.
on her
or
shoulder.
some kind of
It's
headpiece,
a
yeah.
look.
Tilda was serving this whole time. We all
Yeah.
know
She
that. Yeah.
served it, yeah.
And so that meanwhile they arrive, the Aslan and the girls arrive at the witch's castle, and Lucy sees Stone Tumnus and is weeping, but Aslan breathes on him and brings him to life. And he breathes on all the creatures. And so this is a difference in, I feel like in the movie there are all the creatures are warriors. In the book, they're much more like prisoners, and it's a
Mm.
longer section. The battle is like a paragraph, and
Mhm.
there's most of it is like, oh, and we're doing this, and we're freeing these people, and we're all running around. And I mean, I love that section of the book, but I mean, as a kid, like when Andrew talking about like, oh, how you remember, I
Yes.
also loved the battle and would think of like, oh, and they're doing this, and how I would have this creature fight this. I remember the old BBC battle with like their like little cartoon baddies that they were fighting, and it was like so big in your brain. And so this is
That's
how,
the memory of it, right.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Because the battle is really short in the book. You're right. That's exactly. It only lasts a page or whatever, and so yeah,
Yeah, but this, I mean,
not to
it's
a
a good and
kid.
evil conflict. You need a big climactic battle,
Mm-hmm.
And this is so Peter is going to help Edmund, and he's fighting the witch, and I love this choreography where she has like the two swords, and
Mm-hmm.
he's like, she's kicking his ass, but he's fighting so hard.
Yeah.
And this is so I was on the fencing team in college, and I definitely channeled Peter's drama when he was fighting, which didn't really work for me because in fencing, if you telegraph your move, I had a thing where
Yeah.
I'd almost like move my whole body too much, like to tell it, like because of the drama. But
Mm.
it's
You
sports,
did
not
it, but
drama.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But then Aslan roars and arrives with all the reinforcements, and the witch is like impossible, and he jumps on her, and they're like stare at each other, and then he eats her faces.
He
Like it cuts
takes her
away.
out,
Mm-hmm.
And like
and it ain't pretty. He is still a wild animal.
he's a wild animal,
Yeah.
and she's been bullying children, and that's like the least of her crimes. She's been like running a fascist like
Yeah.
That's what we
dictatorship.
all wish we could have done to Hitler, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
just
Sick a
yeah,
lion on him. Yeah.
eat his head.
He did that. And because it's not a glorious way to die.
Mm-mm.
Like
No,
it's not a
no.
battle. Like Aslan just takes her out.
Yep, it's
Uh,
cool.
Yeah.
and that Susan gets to use her bow and arrow because the dwarf is gonna hack Edmund, and she's like, nope. And they heal Edmund, and then they're all like reunited. I love the shot of them reuniting, and Aslan is like freeing everyone, and Lucy goes to heal everyone. And I like so in the book, Aslan has to be like, go heal everyone, Lucy, and like kind of scolds her. And in the movie,
Mm,
Lucy knows. She's like, oh, I gotta go do this.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And the music and the shot where they like transitions from the battlefield to you see the water and the mermaids splashing and the castle
Right.
and the coronation, and in the crowd you can see the badgers and the unicorn and the fox, like they're all okay. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't
Yeah.
worry, kids.
Yeah. Mrs. Beaver, she's like messing with her fur, and he's like, "You look lovely." It's like, I stand. I stand this couple.
And I said we would track who coronates people I think in Return of the King, because Gandalf coronated and Gimli held the crown. So now we have the beavers holding the crown and Mr. Tumnus
Uh-huh.
coronating.
Right.
And they're crowned to the sea. We have Lucy the Valiant. To the woods, we have Edmund the Just. To the sun, Susan the Gentle, and to the sky, Peter the Magnificent. And so in the book, these were like their titles that people started calling them for years. But I kind of like the idea, like Aslan's like, you're gonna grow into this.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And there a cut ballroom scene from this?
Yes, there was.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
There was, and they're just I feel like we shot it. I remember it just didn't need to be there. Like we're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Like I think we did shoot it and then in editorial it was always a little bit on the page of like, "Ooh, this probably won't make it in, but let's get it anyway." And
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't need it at all.
Yeah. It's already like a 2.5 hour kids
Yeah.
movie. Like
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
uh and in the book it talks about how they stopped like deforestation and giant invasions, but also like school, and how they didn't like they stopped busybodies.
Mm.
And then Aslan sneaks out at the party, and Tumnus is like, well, he's not a tame lion. He's around. And we flash to them as adults. They're hunting the white stag, and they see the lamppost, and they don't remember before. They're like, this is like a dream of a dream. And
Mm.
they're following the woods, and you kind of see it transitioning back to the same dialogue as when they first entered. They're like, stop shoving, and they
Yep.
fall out. And now they're children, which has to be an absolute mind fuck of like growing up and then being a child
Is
again.
yes, they've lived this whole life. That's something that definitely is a giant mindfuck for me because I'm like, they've had a bunch
Puberty?
of yeah, they've had puberty, a bunch of experiences as adults, and now they're children again. And it's like,
What?
Yeah, it's like I think they're
Where do
there
you
for
is
put
like
that
that?
in the book?
Yeah.
yeah. They ruled for
Really?
like 10 years or something, and it's like the
Mhm.
golden age. But so like you're Lucy and you're 8, now you're 18, and now you're 8
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, like
And you
imagine
go from being kings and queens to like no
the
power at all.
independence, the power. Yeah.
I
Yet
think
again.
I think people mention how it's how a lot of children felt in the world after the World War. They were kind of forced into adult
Right.
roles, and then things went back to normal.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think the movie adaptation, the books don't touch on it much, but the movie adaptation of Prince Caspian definitely has a lot of like, I want to say fun, but it's not like a fun thing, but like it's they use that a lot, like how that would affect people and like how they act.
I have a logic question.
Yeah.
How are there sequels when they go to Narnia and they end up growing up and then they become children again when they leave? And I'm assuming they go back
Yeah.
and then they're children again. Does
Yes.
it reset? I just a little bit of spoilers so I can understand the logic because I forgot about this sort of epilogue
Yeah.
They
So
enter
or
well, they
prologue.
enter into Narnia the age that they are,
Yeah.
yeah,
but the time can so much time can pass there,
but no
and like
time passes on Earth.
but no time
Right.
passes here. But then when they go back for Prince
Back.
Caspian, like hundreds of years have passed again.
Yeah, in Narnia.
And
Right.
they've become mythological. They've become like almost to the
Oh.
mind of everyone now, like, oh, those kings and queens of old,
Like kind of like a King
Interesting.
Arthur, like
Okay, that makes
they've
sense.
become of stories that, are of myth and legend
Interesting.
until the horn is blown and they're brought back.
So
Interesting.
this is my audition tape. Netflix Animation put me and Alina in charge of Netflix has the rights to Narnia. I think we could do it because I think you would, if I was to do it, I would do an animated movie of this, and then I would make a series like How to Train Your Dragon has like a series that's about them running the country. I just think that's an interesting thing that they
I
kind of
didn't realize
skip
Netflix
over.
had the rights now.
They've had the rights for a few years, and that's public
Oh,
knowledge. That's
interesting.
on the internet. You can Google it. I'm not not sharing insider information, but I don't know anything really about what their plans are
Right.
beyond what is available to the
Yeah.
public that you can find online.
Right.
I don't
So
either.
Interesting.
They've done Prince
So-
Caspian and Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and I have always really loved Magician's Nephew as well,
yeah,
which is a total standalone. Like it
yeah,
can just live alone without
Mm.
the kids for sure. And Eustace doesn't have any of those characters, but
I'm excited for Prince Caspian because I like Ben Barnes.
Ben
Who
Barnes.
doesn't like Ben Barnes though?
I
He's
think the
awesome.
Prince
Universal
Caspian
love.
Prince Caspian is kind of underrated. Like when I went back and rewatched it a few years ago, I was like, okay, this movie's good. It's very different from the book, but the book's kind of a weird book. So it's like a lot of the choices they made make more sense for a film adaptation. Yeah. So let's oh, and there's one last scene where the professor is like sees them and is like, oh, you won't believe it. And he's like, oh, try me. And he tosses the ball, and then that Lucy tries to go back in, and he's like, you're probably not gonna get in through the wardrobe.
I love that, and that's always touched me because I feel like there was a time, and maybe it's Magician's Nephew. I don't know if we're meant to think that the professor was that boy.
I think he is
Oh,
that
I
boy
think,
in the Magician's
yeah. So like
Nephew.
he's not ever been able to get back because Narnia doesn't need him. It's almost
Yeah.
sad. Like he's waited his whole life to get back. And then when these kids come in and they get invited in, but he's still not like he
Yeah.
can't find his way back because that Narnia doesn't need him.
Yeah.
I
And
didn't know any of that. Like I got the sense from the movies that like, okay, this guy knows about Narnia. He understands what's going on. He's not just like, huh, that's really strange that my wardrobe does that. But yeah, no, that's really interesting backstory.
It's like a
for him.
bittersweet sort of sad,
Yeah.
like that's where he felt the best and he can't. He just has to remember it.
And there's no film adaptations of the Magician's Nephew, but there's like a magical tree, and he gets a seed from that, and he plants a tree in his yard, and that's what the wardrobe is made from.
Oh.
So
And there is a lamppost, and there's a reason why that lamppost was in Magician's Nephew because one of the arms is broken off, and that happens in Magician's Nephew.
Yeah, the witch is
The
in
witch
the Magician.
breaks it off somehow
Yeah,
or
and
something.
throws it in to Narnia when it's being made, and it just like sticks. Yeah.
But that book was written last, wasn't it?
Yeah, second to
Magician's
last,
Nephew.
I think.
Second last,
Yeah.
But they put it first.
Yeah. There's a whole debate among people, like, do you read them in chronological order or publishing order? And I'm like, read them however you want. I think this book is a good first intro, though.
Right.
Makes me
Yeah.
want to read it to Atticus now because he has seen the movie, but I do think it would be a really good book. I just think there's so many good lessons in it for kids, about choices and decision making
And it's fun and it's magical and it's not a long read and it has a very warm, comforting tone. I think it, it works very well read aloud. Uh,
I think that's
yeah.
how a lot of kids come to it. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about our vibes and our character. So we talked about the music, how we love the music.
Mhm.
I also really love Mr. Tumnus's like creepy little lullaby.
Yeah. I like
Very good
there's like
smells.
there's one that has like vocals, right? So toward the beginning when she's meeting Tumnus,
Yeah, there's a few that have
have vocals. I
vocals.
like
Yeah.
those a lot. Like the choral vocals is really nice. But yeah, his lullaby, I always, even like when I saw this as a kid, I was like, oh, this is like, I don't know, it's like nice, but also kind of weird, and I don't
Menacing,
know. Yeah.
which captures a kind of forest spirit energy,
Yeah.
And the visuals, I love how sweeping and big Narnia is. And we
Hmm.
talked about how we love the houses
Yeah.
and the camp and the castles. Like Care Paravel, you don't see much of it, but it has this like kind of like a toy set of a castle almost. Like everything's
Right.
big and open, so you can fit your hands in to move your toys around. Like it's
Right, exactly. Like the open windows, you can, yeah.
yeah. As opposed to the witch's castle, which is very like enclosed and like
Mhm.
cold and
Yeah.
suffocating. And then but at the end when it's spring, it's like dripping. It's like melting.
Hmm.
Do you think it's weird? Like you were talking about scope, like how big Narnia feels when like they're trying to get away from the witch, and even Peter's like, God, or Susan's like, this is so much bigger than we thought. And then when Aslan wakes up, they're able to get to the witch's
Yeah.
castle, unfreeze everybody, and then still get to the battle in pretty short time. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of a jump.
That
That's kind of a
is.
leap.
But I think it's one of those things like we refer to it as like refrigerator logic. Like after you're watching and like you buy into everything and then you're like, wait a second. Because I think the movie just captures you so well
You don't
that
think
you don't
about
even
that.
think about actual logical time jumps. Because like, yeah, because like when we were talking about it, I was like, it's like Edmund left the Beavers and all got all the way across Narnia to her
Yeah.
castle
Well, the beavers
before,
live,
like they could,
yeah,
I think the beavers are pretty close to
to the
her
witch.
castle.
Yeah.
right.
But so
But then
Aslan can fly, at least in the book, he like jumps and bounds to the house. And then they
Oh, okay.
describe that like when everyone's leaving all the statues, they like load everyone up on like the faster creatures. So it's like you get on the
Mm,
centaur, you get on the unicorn, okay, let's load everybody up and we're gonna run.
got it. Yeah, I think it is just one of those things that like the movie is just so successful that like you don't even think about it. And then like even now we're talking about it, I'm like, I'm not mad.
who cares?
It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
okay.
not, I'm not
It's
mad
Yeah.
at
okay.
that. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
also I think about it, if you're also saying like this is sort of the vision of like your memory of the story, like if we're looking at this from like a kid's perspective, like maybe the world is a lot smaller, but we're seeing it through the kid's perspective, so it's huge,
Exactly.
so it's like
Yeah.
maybe it is only like a 15-minute walk to everything. For these kids it's like, oh, it's like 5 hours.
Yeah. And it really doesn't take long to melt that ice. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
It's like probably an afternoon. By the
Yeah.
time they get to the waterfall, it's like, what? That's
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I
how
mean, that's
quickly the
something.
magic.
Yeah, in the book they mention that it like goes from January to mid-May in like an afternoon.
Yeah.
Just like because
I
you
mean,
see like the vibrant flowers on the trees and
They've
would
just
that
been waiting.
would we say it's just like it's because all four of them are there and so like everything is speeding up, maybe
yeah,
like the power of them being there.
yeah,
Totally.
everything's in place.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so let's talk about our characters now. Do we root for our protagonist? Is a question we always ask. I would say Lucy is probably the protagonist of the film.
Really?
Lucy, I think they're all kind of protagonists, but I think
Right.
she's our first window. And I
Right.
mean, I think of course you root for her. She's so cute and she's so brave. And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, I have to help my friend. Like she's just they call her Lucy the Valiant, and right, like that's her. Like,
Yeah.
She's
uh,
the ethic. She does the right thing
yeah,
always.
Yeah.
And her wonderment, like, is her superpower
yeah.
or her ability to believe.
And yet they don't make it too like twee or like sweet, like, oh, believe, like the
Nope.
Polar Express kind of thing. They just make it
Right.
like it opens her up to these experiences and like allows her to like form these relationships.
Hmm.
Uh, and then like Peter is also, I think, given a pretty big arc as the
I
oldest and
think
as like the
he's
leader.
the protagonist because his desire is to protect his family, and that carries us from the very, very beginning all the way to the end.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I think
I mean, he leads the army at the end, like
Lucy,
he has that
yeah,
big heroic
I think
Mm.
Lucy is like she's like our
window.
compass, yeah, and
Yeah.
our window through the world.
And the inciting incident.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think Peter is the one who like makes the world more real for us
Yeah.
because he's like getting involved in like basically the politics of all this.
So when I was a small closeted gay kid, I had such a crush on Peter. I like wanted to be him in that like that armor riding the unicorn, but I was also
Uh,
like, oh, he's so cute.
yeah.
Yeah.
He is
Uh
cute.
yeah. And then I mean Edmund is like again, he's a little shit, but he's our little shit. It's like you're like, we
Exactly.
get it, and like you have sympathy for him, and like I like that he's
Yeah.
at the end he is brave. When
Mm-hmm.
he's with people who believe in him and support him, he can rise to that. But when he's expected to be bad and like with the witches like needling at him, like he's
Yeah. I was actually I felt very much for Edmund, but I was super kind of annoyed, I guess. So like at first I was like, wow, this movie like hates Edmund until like the end. But then it's like, oh, this is his perspective. Like he thinks he's just the absolute worst and he's being manipulated to thinking that. And so like it's actually even more effective.
yeah,
But yeah, but I mean, again, even the things he's doing, it's like I understand why he was telling the witch when he first met her. He's like, this is just the information I know. I'm new here. I don't know who you are.
yeah,
You're telling me you're the queen. Cool. And then, he's trying to save his ass. And then he's, trying to save other people. And so it's like, I understand why he's doing what he's doing every step of the way. And so, like, and that's very rare for a character who's like
yeah,
somewhat unlikable and just making bad decisions.
I feel like that's different than the book too, because I don't remember really caring for Edmund. I remember just being really mad at everything
yeah,
Edmund did.
Yeah.
And I think the movie really fleshes that out and gives him a dynamic to play against and a reason for why.
Yeah.
It's just what you can do in a movie, and it was a good way to go, I think, because he can't just be making these decisions in a because he's doing it because he's not connecting to anyone in his family. They don't get him. His brother's
Mhm.
hard on him, like all that stuff just makes you
yeah.
feel other. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a short book. I mean, I kind of think it should be in the public domain. It's so influential and so
Mm.
old. I mean, I know it's only from like the 50s, but it's very simple and fairy tale like. And I think that's why you can do so much with it because it gives you so much
Right.
room to flesh out the characters.
Yeah.
And then we talked about Susan. I wrote she's the realest bitch. She's a bad bitch. I
mhm.
love her.
Yeah.
And they don't go full know it all. She's just like, I'm a little reasonable. I'm a little, and she just
Yeah.
has so many good one-liners.
Yeah,
So yeah,
because she could be annoying, right? She could be
Right.
like the one that's stick in the mud, like no fun and just totally but I think by giving her those great one-liners and the way of how but she's also the mainstream, right? She's the
yeah,
one that tracks the like
Yes.
this is weird.
Yeah.
Like you all are just diving into the reality that this is normal, but this is weird.
She's like, we have to talk about how weird
yes,
this is. Even
Like
if
we're
for just a couple seconds, we just
yeah.
gotta this beaver is talking. Like we have to mention that.
Yes.
and even the
Yeah.
scene where she says, "Oh, I'm no fun," like immediately she's having fun with Lucy.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
yes,
and
Yeah.
I think we she needs that transition because she's so rooted in their reality with the war and stuff and how serious that is, and also that she's kind of like the woman of the family now, trying to be sort of the mother. Uh, and so she's trying to keep it all together, and then as they go into this world, it's like your reality is very different now, and she's like I said, she's clinging to it, but then she has to just be like, okay, this is just how it is.
Yeah.
So there are like kind of core protagonists, they're like who we're following, but we have Aslan, who I think is done with such warmth and compassion and
Mhm.
strength. Like he's just feels so just golden, and his is so expressive. His
His
animation.
design and
Yeah.
animation is so good. And again, I really hate to say it, but Lion King, step it up,
Yeah.
because this is like he's still showing emotion, but it's not like cartoonish. Like it
Yeah.
still looks photorealistic.
Same
There
with
was
the
Even though
so
beavers and the
yes.
fox.
even though
Yeah.
like I don't think a lion could actually make those actual expressions, but it still works. It
There's
just
Yeah.
yeah.
works.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And
Beavers, love the
love
beavers.
the beavers. They're so fun.
The
Uh
best couple.
yeah. Because I also love them because they're not really like a trope. Like a lot of characters, like, oh, we have the mentor, they're this, but it's just like, yeah, the working class beaver couple,
They're just
that's like,
helpful. They're exposition dump.
yeah.
But like we love them, you know.
And we love Tumnus. We talked about him a lot too, how he's so
Mhm.
charming and innocent, and they a character that could be very sus, like that could be done
Yeah.
very wrong. They do him very well.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I love the other Narnians and their designs. Uh and even, the nymphs as like petals and stuff, that's still like a really cool like design
Hmm.
choice. Like the
Yeah.
griffins, that's like the best griffin I've ever seen. I think just everything feels, yeah, I just love all the creature designs.
Yeah.
It's so weird, and I don't wanna I was do you know what I was watching Harry Potter 5 last night,
Mm.
and some of the visual effects are so, like, not good. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Where were we, and what year was that?" Because remember the giant in the forest that Hagrid brings back, like, his
Yes.
brother?
His
Like, that
brother.
it is so
It's
bad,
not
and the
good.
centaurs in that are so bad.
And the centaurs in this are so cool and so good.
Yes. And it
Yeah, I just
well
was like, "Where did they just forget that part?" Where they were like, "The budget doesn't have time for it, just generic
that would have
centaur face."
been uh so
That would
what
have
is
been
that?
way
5.
later.
That'd be
Is
after this
that
one, wouldn't it?
Order the Phoenix?
That was Order of the Phoenix,
Yeah.
That was 2007. That was after this.
2007. So, yeah, they should have been better.
Yeah, at least a little
A
bit,
little bit better with the some of
because
the visual effects faces.
yeah, well, because I guess like that was such a machine over however many years. But yeah, you would think that like they would have improved their base visuals to
Yeah.
be a little bit better, but I guess this movie wasn't as much of a
As
machine as the
as
Harry
a
Potter
standalone,
saga.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so maybe that's the reason, but
I mean,
yeah,
Harry
no,
Potter was
this
making bank. They had the
Oh,
budget.
yeah,
Let's
they
be
didn't they
real.
were like, "We can phone it in for the centaurs,
exact
it's not that important."
Yeah, I mean that's probably it. It's like they probably prioritized key moments even more. Like, okay, we know that no one is gonna care about the giant in the woods until like we need him, but like he doesn't need to look that good. But we need this other
Let's
thing
spend
to
more
look
money
so
on
good.
Voldemort, who's actually, like, ruining the Ministry of Magic with the yeah, let's put our
Exactly.
money into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Everything that Bellatrix is doing, all
yeah,
that stuff. Yeah, I mean the Ministry of Magic, that's probably where all the money went.
yeah.
But yeah, that's so interesting.
And our antagonist, I again, Tilda Swinton as the White Witch, top
So good.
villain, such a high fashion couture. Like her and Maleficent are up there.
But also, let's quickly talk about Tilda Swinton's range. That's all I have to say because it's incredible. This movie, she was the really weird antagonist in the Snowpiercer movie, which I think is also very much on different ends of the spectrum. She's incredible, so good.
Can I tell a moment that was one of my favorite moments of watching her?
Of course.
Yes.
Okay, this was when I was like, "Oh, she's fucking brilliant." So, in the White Witch scene when Edmund comes and he's sitting on her chair,
Okay.
she it was shot where, like, she's standing up and she's looking at him. And we were in editorial in post after the whole movie was shot, and it was like I was watching, and I remember it on the day too, but I was like, she makes it impossible to cut away from her
Yeah.
because she's not done with like a moment. Like the way she was taking in Edmund's like audacity of sitting on her throne, and like there was like 17 things going on
Yeah.
and her like, what am I going to do with all of this information? And it was like, I just remember sitting in editorial with our editor Sim and Andrew, and I'm like, she is so brilliant because
Mhm.
she's the most interesting thing to watch because I don't want you to cut away from her. I want to see like where she's going, and I
Mhm.
don't know if she thinks about that or if she just it's part ownership of a moment, so much so that it becomes a little maybe selfish,
Right.
but it's brilliant. Like, it isn't selfish, it's just masterful. It's
Mhm.
somebody who understands where the camera is, when it's her coverage, and it's technical too.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
not just like an actor who's amazing and present. She has a technicality to her performance that could take a lot of other great actors out of it, but she is also like an artist outside in kind of
Yeah.
visual person. So I don't know, I think I just was like, God, I could study her
Well,
Mm.
the way
choices.
she moves and talks and everything, it's funny because it's so restrained and so cold, yet you see all those emotions without her having
Yes.
to like contort her face. She's just like it's
Mhm.
all so. I'm like, wow.
Another really amazing behind the scenes story, I think the first day of shooting was with her and Edmund, and Andrew and her just talked, and he was like, I think she needed to hear that you are not arch, you are not playing an idea, and that you are never going to be like a Cruella de Vil type villain because we can't, you are you, and
Yeah.
you are like never going to do that. So then she just like everything was free because then it became she was just as subtle and quiet, but it was like,
Yeah.
anyway, I
So
just
much
thought
was
that was so
underneath that
human and so
surface. Yeah.
vulnerable and so artist to artist, like artistry talking to each other to find the right dynamic for what this film needed.
Mhm.
And she really like talked about it a lot Andrew. Like she crafted it, but with like a lot of knowledge, with a lot of brain
Mhm.
so that she could let it go on the
Yeah.
day. Anyway, I just think she's so interesting cerebrally, and then how she can just go on the gut on the day because
Yeah.
she
Mhm.
is really smart.
Yeah. And I mean, she's an amazing antagonist, and
Mhm.
all her baddies are so slimy and creepy. And,
Mhm.
I love armies of
Yeah.
creatures. And this was it was so fun. So I guess we can quickly touch on the themes. I think the themes that stuck out to me was obviously the theme of hope. They say there's always hope, that
Mhm.
you arriving here brings hope, and the power of love and sacrifice.
Yeah.
And then just also there's a really strong message of community and family, both between like the Narnian community, like the way
Mhm.
Tumnus and the Beavers and all these people know and care about each other, and Aslan sees them as a family, and the family of these kids, like
Yeah.
how much they care about each other.
I kind of just like want to go back to like the idea that like this is has a lot of like heavy biblical themes, and that like it wasn't something I ever thought about until I was an adult and someone brought that up, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't realize that it was very Christian." I was like, "Well, that makes sense. Is why I was allowed to watch it." But it just like it I don't think it's overt in a sense that like it's overpowering or feels um
Preachy.
yeah, like
Yeah.
it feels like it's taken that idea of sacrifice, um, saving people from their sins, like the idea of that type of love, you know, and taking that and just sort of, it's just in this movie. It's a much bigger part of a much bigger story. And I think it works. Like it doesn't feel, obviously like it's Easter and I'm thinking about, the crucifixion as one does. And, I am sort of seeing, similarities, but it's not overbearing. And so I think like I mean, I don't know the reception. I think it was pretty positive,
Yeah.
but I can't imagine many Christians would be that upset about the execution of the story. And the people who love fantasy are like, it's also good. Like,
Yeah.
so it's got that really good blend of what
Mhm.
people are looking for out of the story.
And it focuses on the love of the sacrifice, not like the guilt. And yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
Because yeah.
it's also it's like it's not for all humanity. It is for this one boy. This one boy
Yeah.
who made this mistake. And Aslan's like, I just met this kid, but you know what? I'm gonna sacrifice myself for him because I know he's a good person, you know, and I think he deserves a chance. and this witch, she's just crazy, and so I guess I have to go sacrifice myself. It's like, it's not that sort of big overarching like Jesus died for everyone, since like Aslan is like literally giving himself up in place of Edmund. It's a small scale.
Yeah.
It's effective.
Yeah, it is effective. I
And I
think
get,
thematically what's ringing to me even louder now, and I remember even just, the horrible Trump years, it's just like, oh my God, we all felt like we were working together to, like, there
yeah,
was an underground thing. And like, I guess that the context of like when C.S. Lewis wrote this, I don't think we can ignore what the
yeah,
war and what was going on, and like the reason why kids were getting sent out. And
Mhm.
like, it's just never something I understood as a kid at all, reading the books,
yeah,
or even that was not even in my scope of understanding. But I do think it's wise to that that was part of the movie, because I think it is absolutely feeling powerless in a world of adults that you have no say in. Finally, you get power, and the you get everything handed
mhm,
to you, and you get to choose, and it's all up to you.
Mhm.
And having that, doing the right thing, and then going back into like having no power at all and just being a kid again. And yeah, I just think that's pretty fascinating
Yeah.
thematically.
yeah.
And I
There's
don't think you
something,
can really like try to nail that. I think you just have to put it in there and hope that it lands or something.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
And just the underground nature of saving people, like the beavers, and hiding and tunneling,
mhm,
literally tunneling,
yeah,
Jews out of like, Nazi Germany, like all those things like are just like was there. That was in everybody's mind.
yeah. It wasn't so far away. It wasn't so
Hmm.
removed. Yeah, I guess we ask our final two questions. Was that your fantasy? I'm gonna say yes. It has been basically my whole life. So yeah, can't deny that now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember loving this movie as a kid. It's been quite a few years since I've seen it, but it still holds up. Like, it's still such a good story, and honestly, the craft of the movie, again, like talking about like the animations of the animals, and just the CGI is just like, it's really good. It still holds up like for a lot of the movie. Um, so it's just such a joy to watch, and absolutely, I love this story. I love the world. I wish Narnia existed. Honestly, that'd be so cool.
What
Well,
about you?
I'm really biased because I got to be there.
It was your
I
fantasy and your real life.
it really holds a super special place in my life chapter, because we really all did become a family, and those kids, I like love them dearly. And they grew up. It's still weird to me to think that like Georgie's like 24 or 25 now. Like that's so
Yeah.
trippy, or I don't even know how old she is, but like I saw her before Christmas, she was in town. Like there's something that happened on the movie that I guess wanted to give context to, that the magic, I'm glad it like you guys loved it and that you
Mhm.
saw it as kids, because it was a magical experience as well. And we still have Narnia Facebook groups where we touch base with each other. Like people live in England and Australia and New Zealand, and everybody is everywhere, and we still like totally are connected. And I don't know exactly why, because I think it starts from top down. I think Andrews
Mhm.
pretty much sets a tone like that, but also like because of the kids, it was so important to create a safe and healthy experience for them. And all of their families were like, my kid is doing what now? Like, I don't know if I want my daughter to be on a movie set. I don't. So
Mhm.
we were like, Perry Moore, who has since passed away,
Mhm.
was one of the people who got the rights at Walden Media. And the kids loved him. And like he'd play tennis, like we would go do things on the weekends with all, like we have outings. So it was a really cool, special time. And what I love is that I've heard interviews with the kids now, and they've all gone on to do careers. Like, Ben Barnes obviously is huge, and like Anna and William, and they all like none of them talk shit about it. None of them are like, oh, like how we look back at our stuff and be like, ooh, that was like you know, like, it's not my proudest moment or whatever, but they all are like, "Yes!" Like, love their fans. I just think it's so cool.
Mhm.
None of them are jaded
Yeah,
because they're just also good people
yeah.
still, you know?
So I guess, the question of what did we learn today? I guess we learned that the magic of Narnia is real, and it was alive on that set and
Literally,
alive in
yeah.
that movie. Yeah.
And even, like, Howard Berger, who did the makeup effects, and, like,
Mhm.
he's gone on to do amazing things, he's like, "Let's do it again." He's always, like, sending emails, "Come on, Andrew, let's make a movie. Let's do another
Yeah.
Narnia," because he even realizes that experience is really rare.
Yeah. You got to be part of something really special.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
cool.
So, is there anything you would like to plug to our listeners, a theater company or
Oh,
yeah.
theater of note in LA, please support.
Awesome. Well, you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We are at Not My Fantasy Pod. If you're on YouTube, hi, hello, thank you for watching. Helen, what should they do?
Smash that like button.
Give us a like. Definitely leave us a comment. Let us know what do you love about this movie? What do you remember? What was your
Yeah.
favorite thing? Also, if you haven't watched it, go watch it. Like,
Yeah.
it's on Disney Plus. Go watch it. Like, it's so good. And then, it doesn't matter where you're watching or listening. Head over to Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star review. Let us know what you love about it. In a couple weeks, we're gonna start reading those off. So we want to get as many people doing that right now as possible, and you can get a shout out on the podcast.
You can
So
follow
cool.
me on Instagram at Cullen Ever After and let me know if I should make that audio drama about a magical kingdom like Narnia. Now, first we just want to, Alina, thank you so much for your
Yes.
time and for coming on. This was so fun to record. I was so excited about it, and it like truly lived up. I really want to do Narnia justice. So I thank you, and
Aw.
I hope our listeners really enjoy this.
Thank you for
Yeah.
doing such a deep dive and watching it as kids. That's so amazing. Like
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
no,
you guys watched it in the theaters and everything. I love it.
Yeah, and it's awesome to be able to meet someone who is so deeply ingrained in making this movie. So it is kind of just like a trippy experience for me to be
yeah,
like, I love this movie so much. You're like, I helped do that. So thank you
Oh,
for being in that experience, and thank you to everyone who made the movie because
yeah,
it is really fantastic. And what year are we at? 2023. How long ago was this movie? It doesn't matter. It still holds up. It's
still holds up.
good.
So this was our first in our kind of springtime series of medieval resurrection movies. We will
Ooh.
be revisiting a very classic tale, another Walt. This is our not our first Disney, but our first Walt Disney animated feature that we will be talking about. We will be visiting Sleeping Beauty.
A movie
With
I've
it,
never seen all the way through.
yeah,
Spoilers
wait,
for next
which
episode.
one? Which
Sleeping
one?
Beauty, 1959, the animated classic. We will be hearing fairy tales from Germany and France and a little in Italy and England, and exploring another story about like resurrection and the power of love from a very different perspective. I associate that movie with the spring, so I'm like, this is the time of year to do it.
We should also try to figure out who was which from the Glee Boot, because I think we assigned each other a
Oh,
witch.
harpies.
I don't remember who I was from Sleeping Beauty.
Oh, which
The fairy,
fairy?
the
You were
fairies.
Flora. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
What color is she?
Red. Yeah.
Okay, I'll wear red next time.
All right. Well, again, Alina, thank you for coming on, and tune in next time, listeners.
Thank
Bye.
you for
Bye.
having me.